I will call to order the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. To all persons interested in or affected by the action of the Zoning Board of Appeals, are hereby notified pursuant to Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and all amendments thereto, that a public hearing on the following appeals will be held on Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. The Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing will be held by remote participation methods. Public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting will be televised live via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live stream on the Town of Barnstable's website, which is http://streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site/watch/1?channel =1. Real-time access to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting is available by utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID provided. Public comment can be addressed to the Zoning Board of Appeals by utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID. The Zoom link is https://townofbarnstable-us.zoom.us/824-352-3006-1 or calling 888-475-4499 and entering the meeting ID 824-3523-0061. Applicants, the representatives, and individuals required or entitled to appear before the Zoning Board of Appeals may appear remotely and may participate through accessing the link provided or telephone number. Documentary exhibits and or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting to anna.brigham@town.barnstable.ma.us so that they may be displayed for remote access viewing. Copies of the applications are available for review by calling 508-862-4682 or emailing anna.brigham@town.barnstable.ma.us. All right, so we will call the meeting to order with an introduction of board members. I'm Chair Jacob Dewey. Herb Bodenseek.
I'm right here.
Paul Pinard.
Present.
Mark Hansen.
Present.
Aaron Webb.
Present.
Denise Johnson.
Present.
Larry Hurwitz.
Present.
And Manny Alves.
Present.
Awesome. We have a full board tonight. Notice of recording this meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals is being recorded and broadcast on the town's government access channel in accordance with MGL Chapter 38, Section 20. I must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Seeing none. First order of business, we have minutes from August 23rd, 2023 and September 13th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
Motion to approve.
Mark. Mark has made a motion to approve, and who's second?
Second.
Second.
All right, second Denise. Roll call vote. Herb Bodenseek.
In favor.
Paul Pinard.
Well, I have to, I wasn't here for September 13th, but I approve August 23rd.
Okay, you can abstain. We've got enough numbers to approve them. Mark Hansen.
In favor.
Aaron Webb.
In favor.
Denise Johnson.
In favor.
Larry Hurwitz.
In favor.
And Manny, you aren't here for those meetings, so if you want to abstain?
Yes, please.
All right, so moving on to old business. The first item, appeal number 2023-019, Kevin Y. and Corey L. Vilsant have applied for a special permit in accordance with section 240-47-2 accessory dwelling units, ADUs. The applicant seeks to remove and replace an existing accessory structure with a new accessory dwelling unit. The applicants also seek to modify special permit number 2020-038 to allow further build out of the property for the accessory dwelling unit and additions to the principal dwelling. The subject property is located at 358 Flint Street, Marston's Mills, Mass. As shown on Assessor's Map 101 as parcel 121. It's located in the Residence F RF zoning district. Members assigned were myself, Aaron Webb, Herb Bodenseek, Paul Pinard, and Denise Johnson. This was continued from August 23rd, 2023. And we did receive a correspondence today requesting to continue this further to October 25th.
Yes, I believe.
Someone want to make a motion to continue to October 25th?
So moved.
Paul,
All right. And
Second.
who's Denise seconds? Roll call vote. Herb Bodenseek,
In favor.
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
Paul Pinard,
in favor.
Denise Johnson,
Favor.
and I am also in favor. So that is continued, which moves us to appeal number 2023-021. Cape Town Plaza LLC has applied for a special permit pursuant to section 240-57A and C circumstances warranting reduction of requirements. The applicant seeks to establish an overall shopping center ratio for the property of 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of shopping center gross floor area. The subject property is located at 790 Ino Road, Hyannis, Mass, as shown on Assessor's Map 311 as parcel 092. It's located in the Business B and Highway Business HB zoning district. This was continued from September 13th, 2023, and we did not assign members. So I will assign our regular members present: Herb Bodenseek, Paul Pinard, Mark Hansen, Aaron Webb, and myself. And then we will, Attorney Cox, do you want me to do these simultaneously? Is that okay?
I was going to suggest that. That would be great.
Okay. And so I'm going to read into the record appeal number 2023-022. Cape Town LLC has petitioned for a variance pursuant to section 240-65A through E and H, signs in B, UB, HB, HO, S&D, and SD1 districts. The petitioner seeks to establish a comprehensive site-wide tenant building and pylon signage criteria to regulate total allowable signage area, location, and illumination for the landing at Hyannis. The subject property is located at 790 Ino Road, Hyannis, Mass, as shown on Assessor's Map 311 as parcel 092. It's located in the Business B and Highway Business HB zoning districts. Again, this one was continued from September 13th, 2023. And we will have the same member sitting on this: Herb Bodenseek, Paul Pinard, Mark Hansen, Aaron Webb, and myself. Attorney Cox, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Eliza Cox. I'm an attorney at Nutter, McLennan and Fish in Hyannis, and here on behalf of Cape Town Plaza LLC, the lessee and petitioner of these two applications that are pending. Joining me this evening is Amanda Chisholm of Cape Town Plaza LLC. Amanda and I are going to be co-presenting the appeals, and what we were planning on doing is I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to walk through some slides relating to the parking special permit request, which is the first appeal. Then I'll talk a little bit about how it meets the standards that are before the board. And then we can go right into the signage request or pause, whatever you'd like to do, Mr. Chair, at the time. So I think what I'll do now is turn it over to Amanda to sort of set the stage, and then I'll talk a little bit about the special permit request.
All right, sounds good. Let me share my screen here.
You have
Yes, I think I have permission. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. All right, so good evening. As Liza said, I'm Amanda Chisholm. I'm a development director at WS Development. We just wanted to spend a few minutes kind of walking through the property, and then I can talk you through the two appeals that are in front of you tonight. But just wanted to give you a little bit of background. If you've been by the site recently, you can see that it's actively under redevelopment and renovation. So wanted to start with kind of explaining where we are in that process. And then, as Liza said, I'll talk through our application for the property-wide parking ratio, and then move into our building signage as well as our pylon signage. So just for orientation purposes, I'm just showing a site aerial here. The landing in Hyannis is this property. that I'm moving my mouse around right here. With Route 132 to the south, we are also bound on the west by Airport Road and on the east by Barnstable Road. Obviously very close to the regional airport as well. And we have been involved in this site since 2011 when we first took over the ground lease, and then more recently participated in the town RFP process to enter into a longer term ground lease to really redevelop this property. The property is controlled by the airport and the town, so we are the long-term lessor. And as part of that RFP process, are committed to renovating and reconstructing the property. In terms of orientation, I just wanted to show you a couple photos of what Cape Town Plaza looked like previously. Many of you will know this site as the home of the former Kmart. We have current tenants there, Ulta, Panera Bread, Working Gear. If you have driven by recently, you'll see that the site itself is undergoing a pretty major reconstruction, adding in a lot of landscaping, reorienting the drive aisles, redoing the lighting. And we're also working on the building, the main building at the back there. So we're introducing new facades to the majority of that building as well to really modernize the center. And just to give you guys an idea of what that will look like, these are some renderings of the final product. Again, that main building in the back that's currently under construction. You can see more modern facades, bringing in some new design details with the awnings and sconces, and really trying to upgrade the property to create a new best-in-class asset. Also, the emphasis on landscaping, we're adding in a passive green, a number of trees and native plantings throughout, just to really create a new place. It's going to be a really great redevelopment in the end. We work really closely with the airport. Obviously, I meet with Katie Service, the manager over there, on a regular basis as we're walking through the redevelopment process, keeping them updated, and then also periodically doing airport commission updates just to keep everyone in the loop in terms of where we are with leasing and our redevelopment plans. The way this has all been set out is in a couple of different phases here. So everything that's not in red, in that pink shade, is what's currently under reconstruction and renovation. So we're doing the majority of the site with the landscaping that you saw in the renderings, improving the drainage on site, and adding in sidewalks for pedestrian accessibility. And then the facades are all under reconstruction from where the former Cardi's was located, if you're familiar with the site, all the way up into Ulta. Phase 2, which you see here, is really a concept plan at this point. We don't have leases that are completed at this point. We don't have final site plans for tenants, but we did think it was important to show you all the vision for what we hope to achieve with phase 2 so that you have that for context as we walk through our request tonight for a parking ratio and for signage. Again, all of this would have to go through site plan review, all the phase 2 buildings that we're proposing, but we are hoping to really establish the property out on Route 132, improve the curb appeal with new buildings that are modernized, and also create a pedestrian wall so it feels like a pedestrian friendly property from the inside as well. So that's just a little bit of background. Now I can launch into our first appeal for the special permit for an overall shopping center parking ratio. What we're really hoping to establish tonight is this baseline so that we have that baseline in place to design to in terms of our phase 2 development. So that's really why we're in front of you. Obviously, a very important part of being able to design new buildings and understanding what that parking ratio will be. We are recommending and requesting a 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Obviously, as shopping center operators, it's really important for us to ensure that we have enough parking for our tenants and our patrons. We want to make sure that the site is easy to access and the customers can easily get to the spaces that they're trying to go. So we're also trying to walk that line, ensuring there's enough parking, but also balancing that with the obligation to redevelop the site through the RFP process and the subsequent ground lease that we signed. So based on our experience, we feel like this is a good parking ratio to set, and it will work in terms of what we're trying to do at the site. We're also basing this on the ITE, or the Institution of Transportation Engineers, parking generation report. Our land use code in that report, which is referred to as an industry standard, is as a shopping center. So we're an integrated group of establishments as opposed to calculating parking ratios for each individual use. Typically somebody who's coming to a shopping center is parking once and traveling on foot to multiple stores. So that's how that land use code is treated in the Institution for Transportation Engineer report. And these are just a couple of the averages that come from there in terms of peak periods. You can see they range from 3.16 vehicles per 1,000 square feet of GLA on a non-Friday weekday to a little higher per 1,000 on a Saturday. So we just wanted to include that for reference. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that, again, as an operator of a shopping center, it's really important for us to make sure that we're checking in on and ensuring that we have adequate parking at each of our centers. So we actually fly drones and record footage on the peak shopping day of the year, which is Black Friday. So this is just some of the data that we've collected over time from that drone footage. I excluded 2020. That would have really skewed the data downwards because that was during COVID. But from 2019 through 2022, these are the effective parking ratios at these centers, which are all in Massachusetts. Blackstone Valley out at Millbury, which is one of our busiest centers. Some of you might be familiar with Legacy Place in Dedham or the street in Chestnut Hill, as well as Mansfield Crossing. So essentially what we're doing is counting the cars that are parked on the busiest day and then looking at that in terms of the shopping center or GLA to come up with these ratios that are how the center is parked on a Black Friday. And then I just wanted to bring the site plan back up one more time just for orientation as you're thinking through and considering this. Again, really important for us to be able to establish this baseline so that we can understand sort of how to design and contextualize our second phase, which right now is really a vision for the site without having definitive leases, tenant plans, or having gone through site plan review at this point. So I'm going to turn this over to Liza to walk through relief requested. And then defer to you guys if you want to talk through this or if you want me to launch right into signage.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. So the application that we filed with this particular request is a special permit under section 24057 of the zoning ordinance, which allows the zoning board to reduce the amount of required parking through the granting of a special permit if lesser off-street parking is shown to be adequate given special circumstances, and it lists some. Those include characteristics of the use and validating normal methods of calculating the parking demand, which we suggest is applicable here. As Amanda described, and I think everyone is very familiar with the site, this is a multi-tenant, multi-use shopping center that envisions a mix of retail, specialty retail, banking, and various types of dining within the shopping center. And a key aspect of this, as Amanda mentioned, in considering the phase 2 and redevelopment of the site is establishing a parking ratio that would apply across the entire shopping center based upon the square footage of the shopping center in its entirety, rather than on each individual tenant use. And so currently, right now, the zoning ordinance in section 24056, which is the schedule of parking demand requirements, does not have a shopping center use category for determining the required number of parking spaces. Rather, what happens is the current zoning bylaw would require every single tenant to calculate its own amount of required parking spaces based upon whether the tenant is a retail use, a restaurant use, an office use. And as I think you can imagine, this is very cumbersome, particularly when tenants change. If you go from a retail to a restaurant where the parking is based on the number of seats versus a retail space, which is based on the square footage. But not only is it cumbersome as tenants change, but it also, and this is one of the bases for the special permit request, you end up with a substantial amount of excess parking because that type of calculation where each individual tenant's use is factored into the required parking results in a significant amount of excess parking spaces because it doesn't reflect how customers use the shopping center. Unlike if this were a single tenant use location, customers and guests here frequently park in one place and then visit multiple tenants within the center. As a result, fewer spaces are needed for each tenant since one single parking space serves multiple tenants and multiple uses. As Amanda mentioned, in addition, to make this an even easier effort, part of this redevelopment includes adding pedestrian pathways throughout the site to encourage people to park once and then visit multiple uses within the center. So here, under the current bylaw, requiring each tenant in the center to document that it individually complies with 24056 has the result of having far too many parking spaces, and as I mentioned, doesn't adequately reflect how this center actually functions. Amanda showed a slide earlier that had the ITE ratios, and as you saw on that, the proposed ratio of 3.5 is below the peak number that ITE, the parking manual, predicts for these types of shopping centers. And again, obviously ensuring that there's adequate parking is very important to my client. They want this to be a friendly, easy, and accessible shopping center, but they also don't want significant amounts of unused parking that inhibit redevelopment options like what exists on the center right now. And so we're asking the board to approve the 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. We think it's a reasonable and realistic ratio and allows the applicant to confidently plan for future phases and improvements. So I'm going to pause there. Mr. Chair, we can either go on to the signage request, or if the board wants to talk about the parking special permit, happy to do it either way. I will say, when we get to the stage where you're looking at conditions, if we get there this evening, I do have some comments on the draft conditions that were included in the staff report, which we did review with your staff. So I'll want to walk through those at the appropriate time, but I'll pause and take your direction at this stage.
I think I would rather, we do some questions specific to this, if that's okay with you. And I don't know what other board members feel, but I just have a few questions sort of while this is sort of fresh before we get lost in signage.
I agree.
That makes sense.
So I guess I'll just start off with just a few quick questions. What's the total number of spaces? Like, I know we're looking at 3.5 per 1,000 of square feet of shopping, but what is the actual existing number of parking spaces and what we'll have in the proposed?
Amanda, do you have that handy?
Yes, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, we're under development, so these numbers are fluctuating, but I should be able to get that information for you. Okay. So before our redevelopment, there were around 1,200 spaces. We actually removed the garden center from Kmart. So after the redevelopment, we'll have around 1,300 because that garden center was precluding parking within it. It was an outdoor sort of gated in area. And if we wanted to meet, I think the zoning as it is now, we would need close to 1,500 spaces. And obviously we don't know how much we're going to be doing in phase 2, so I can't tell you exactly how many parking spaces will be on site at the end of the second development.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
So basically this would be, we're non-conforming, pre-existing before it started, it was non-conforming already.
Exactly.
Yes.
So does the 3.5 factor in terms of square footage, the phase 2?
It would. So as phase 2 is developed, we'd have to maintain that ratio on the site.
Okay.
It would basically set a new ratio no matter what they built, essentially, Paul's what they're kind of looking to get a standard here so they can work backwards from that and say, okay, here's our new parking requirements. Let's build, let's lease based on that.
Right, but my question revolved around the fact that that if phase 2 was not involved in 3.5, there's no more space to increase that. So your 3.5 is based upon this view graph that's up there now, which includes phase 2.
Yeah, so we would need to reduce the parking ratio or get some relief from the zoning bylaws that exist to be able to develop these buildings.
So,
That makes
the
sense.
3.5 does not include the square footage of phase 2.
3.5 is what we would like to have as the property parking ratio. So we don't know the square footage of phase 2 at this point because some of it needs to be leased. We don't have tenants finalized, but what we'd like to do is set a property parking ratio for the overall site so that we can then back into that and ensure that we are not going to a ratio that would not be allowed by the municipality. So we want to be able to figure out how much we can do and how we can lay things out. A lot of this is also going to be subject to site plan review. There could be comments that come through that process when we're ready to do phase 2 that would affect the layout, that would affect the landscaping or other elements that might influence how much parking ends up on site. But what we're trying to do is establish a ratio that we can design to.
If we approve this ratio, then phase 2 is constrained to that ratio as it exists
Right.
now.
That's right.
Whole property would be constrained to that ratio.
Right.
That's right.
To that point, probably to you, Attorney Cox. So when we're looking, we're identifying this as shopping center gross floor area. How are we defining shopping center? You know, if a restaurant goes in there, is that falling under shopping center, or is that going to trigger us over to restaurant ratio?
No, the idea would be all of those uses, including a restaurant. So essentially, any retail, shopping center, restaurant uses, all of those would be encompassed in that ratio. We wouldn't separately look at tenants.
Do we have a definition of shopping center? What falls under that umbrella?
We don't. We did include, and it was on Amanda's slide, the ITE parking manual has a definition. There you go. And that's the definition that they use within the ITE manual, parking manual. An integrated group of commercial establishments that is planned, developed, owned, and managed as a unit.
Okay. Because I just would be a little bit concerned. You know, I think something like a Home Depot Lowe's parking intensity from a shopping center is different than I don't know, some of the smaller retailers that the images you showed us look like that are, you know, more boutique size shops with less moving parts, less trucks, less, you know, moving of product too. So that's just one concern a little bit there of just not having, we just don't have a town definition of what shopping center is. And then one other question, just in terms of just traffic flow, I don't know if that's really what's being asked here, but just sort of curious about like space for trucking and trailers and trash and deliveries and that kind of stuff. It looks like probably around the back, but it's also hard to tell in the images we've seen.
Yeah. I mean, this is a conceptual plan. Obviously, those are details that are evaluated thoroughly during the site plan review process. So as you know, phase 2 comes online, that's absolutely the conversations that we have with the town departments during site plan review.
I think that's all of my questions. Other board members, I can't see everyone, so feel free to just speak up.
I do have a couple of questions, probably to piggyback. So Paul asked my phase 2 question there. One of the things as I'm looking at the drawings here, is there a standard? I understand there's a standard for the retail customers. I'm looking along the back of the building specifically here. Is there another standard to take into account for employee parking, or is that factored into the 3.5? So obviously you've got probably several hundred employees that could be working, say, at something of this size, assuming phase 2. How does that factor in?
It would be included in that ratio, and that is how the zoning ordinance right now regulates parking. The amount of employees are included in the ratio based on the square footage.
Okay. And is just for clarification, is the standard now, I know you showed a couple of other properties and how that runs around the 3.5 spaces per 100 per 1,000. Is that typical of industry now, or is it higher? Are we looking at a lower number than what would be, say, industry standard currently?
So I'll just flip back to that. This is how we try to test how our centers are doing. And the reason why we do it on the peak shopping day is to see on a day when most people are out shopping in an actual center, what is that going to look like? So this is a really good baseline for us in terms of our centers. I mean, trending over time, you've seen this sort of progressively since early 2000s, but people do a lot of online shopping. The actual amount of people parking on site has tended to go down. So this is really what we would use to kind of test and make sure we have enough. Like I said, obviously it's critical for us that we do have enough because we don't want congested centers where people turn around and leave because they can't find a parking space. So we really are trying to set what we think is a really reasonable ratio for the site. Again, like I said before, some of this could change too with site plans or tenant requirements. What ends up on site could be different, but we're really trying to establish a baseline that we can work towards to design.
And so with that, is the plan even conceptually to accommodate parking in the rear of these buildings, or is it really going to be based out front? I mean, you're showing cars there. I know it's a conceptualized drawing, but is that because obviously there's not necessarily rear entrances and things currently, but would there be sidewalks? Would there be a way for people to get around?
So all of the site that's not in red will be delivered, mid next year. So you will see this on site with the parking in the back and the access and sidewalks to provide access to the existing building on site. This is likely to end up like this, but again, since we don't have finalized plans, I wouldn't want to say that it's going to be exactly like this. Again, a big priority for us, finding backup house spaces, making sure that it is walkable, that it's pedestrian friendly. So we would want to find ways to connect the buildings across the site and to ensure that people can navigate and park in one place while they're doing that.
Okay. And my last question is just if that, let's say, a large space like what I believe is going to be a tile floors and walls type of place, do you have any sort of data for if that were to change tenancies and, as Jake pointed out, become a Home Depot like business? Is there a parking ratio there? Are they aware what that might be? Is it higher?
You mean that's associated with that individual use?
More along that line, what is it? Is it 4.5 per 1,000 square feet? Is it 5.5? For something like that level of retailer.
From my experience, what I've seen in a lot of zoning bylaws is retail defined pretty broadly to encompass a lot of different types of uses. So typically you would see one parking ratio assigned to retail in general, which might include anything from a Home Depot to a small boutique store. I know everybody does it a little bit differently, but the idea with this is that we would have such a variety of uses, small users, large users, some restaurant, some bank, that in the end, it becomes a wash because you're parking for one use and you're walking to another, the way a shopping center would work.
Okay.
And Amanda, that's consistent with the other centers that you showed us on the Black Friday numbers, right? So those kind of combinations are reflected in the numbers that she showed us from Black Friday at their other locations.
Exactly. We typically have anchor stores and smaller stores across all of our centers.
I got a quick question. Going back to that slide with the other developments that you guys manage, is 3.5 across the board per 1,000 square feet the standard for all these other? I mean, again, this graph is interesting, but I don't know, maybe I'm missing it, but is 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet across the board for all of these places?
So this is the effective parking ratio on site. So we're really just looking at how many cars are parked. We're taking that and looking at that over the amount of square footage of each of these centers. So that's what's actually happening, how the center's parking on Black Friday. In terms of this,
no, I get that. I'm just curious, so does Blackstone, is it 3.5 per 1,000 square feet, or is it less, or is it more? I just don't know the answer.
Like,
So
is
for
the community's
Blackstone-
restriction? Is that what you're asking, Aaron? Like,
Got
is
it.
their
Okay.
town bylaw say?
Yeah,
So
I guess I'm just wondering if it's more of a WS that you per 1,000 square feet per your properties want 3.5 cars across your board, or is it dependent upon each town or, location?
Yeah, I mean, so based on recent data, if we were going in front of all these communities at this point, probably that is what we would ask for, because that's what has been displayed across many of our centers as reasonable. But everyone does it differently. Towns will require more or less. I have some centers that have less than a 3.5. I have some that have higher than a 3.5. Some that have gone higher that I've had to go back into and negotiate with. So the standard there kind of really varies. What we're focused on for the most part is what our centers are actually parking at, and then working from there to set a reasonable baseline.
Gotcha. That's it for me.
Anyone else, Paul?
Yeah, Amanda, ITE, what again does that stand for?
That's the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and they have a parking generation report. Basically, it describes a number of different land uses, and it gets into some details about the peak periods and how they range in terms of parking ratios on site for different land uses. So what we're showing you is the shopping center land use.
Is this an industry group or a government group or what?
It's an industry group. So they have a trip generation manual that often traffic engineers point to try and estimate how much traffic a development is going to create. And then they also have this parking generation report that, again, looks at shopping centers all across the country to come up with these averages.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Herb, I have a
Oh,
question.
go ahead, Herb.
I'm just curious on the chart you were showing, like the 3.28 for the Blackstone Valley. What percentage of available parking is that? I'm assuming it's that the parking lots weren't full in any of those cases, or maybe they were, or maybe they were close to full. But the available parking versus what was actually used.
Gotcha. I'd have to comb through the photos to give you a good answer on that. I mean, most of them don't show a full parking lot, but I'd have to look very carefully at each of them before telling you yes or no that they were full or not full.
Very good, thank you.
I just have one more follow-up question, and maybe Attorney Cox can help with this. So we use the Cape Cod Mall, for instance, as a example of parking across the street. When that was developed, was it used in the sense of each tenant you had to have their own parking, or was it a shopping plaza designated, what we're talking about here?
So it's the latter. There's a special zoning overlay district that affects the Cape Cod Mall, and they created their own parking ratio for that mall property.
Okay, so it's similar to this in the sense of one parking ratio for the entire unit. Yeah,
correct.
But we also understand too that there's an excess amount of parking over at the mall that sits, empty 99% of the time. So I'm good. Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, I think two other follow-up questions. One, again, shopping center is so broad to me. And I know that what you propose and what was negotiated with the town is that there'll be no housing there. Is that in the entire 100 years of the land lease, there'll be no housing or any other of that nature there?
Yeah, this is a commercial development. So for yep.
And then do you anticipate, as mall culture sort of changes, that you're going to have a lot of like experience type tenants, activities, things that aren't sort of slow retail, that are more like, who knows, whatever happens in the future, you can go and, VR walk on the moon or something, and that drives a lot more people?
I mean, that's a great question. I do think we see different uses like that, but I also think that we have this other obligation, which is what's allowed under zoning right now. So if we were to have a use like that, we would likely need to go before the zoning board in some capacity. Again, I'm not exactly sure how that's defined. That hasn't come across my lap yet, but if it were sort of an out of bounds or an atypical use, I'd expect that we would have to have some kind of conversation with the town.
Okay. But right now, something like a bowling alley could potentially fall under shopping. What are we calling it? Shopping center? Yeah.
So
Attorney Cox or Amanda?
I think is that an entertainment use? I have to
Entertainment,
comb the zoning. Yeah. But
I
Okay,
think
so
that
something
would
like
be-
that
yeah.
would come to zoning. It wouldn't be by right.
No, well, haven't looked to see if that particular use would be allowed in the B zoning district.
I just know things like
I don't know
the
the answer to
lanes
that.
at the mall creates more parking need than,
Mhm.
you know, GameStop or whatever. And so I just, you know, and I think that's the way a lot of retail space is going to continue to go. So I just wanted to sort of keep that in mind as we approve a very broad shopping center use for the parking ratio. But I think those are all of my comments. I mean, again, I think to Amanda's point, the market will dictate here. You know, you have to have enough parking to have people go to these shops. So I'm not overly concerned about it, and I think site plan review will review all any of these things relatively closely.
Yeah. And I think it's important to keep in mind that this is the minimum that would be required. So like you said, Mr. Chairman, it's very possible that a tenant or a particular use may say, we want more than that for our particular use. So this board isn't setting a maximum, it's setting a minimum number of spaces that would be required if this is approved.
Perfect. So if there's no more board discussion, I'm trying to think, should we do public comment on this or should we go to signs? Seeing, I guess we sort of separated it. Why don't we open for public comment and we'll just see if there's any public comment on the item. And I don't think we received anything via email, correct?
That's correct.
Amanda, do you mind just unsharing screen so I can see everyone, please?
Yeah.
Thanks. Is there anyone here from the public that wants to speak to item 2023-021? All right. Seeing none, we won't close public comment yet, but let's move on to the signage, unless anyone from the board has any questions or thinks we should go a different direction on it.
I heard Bonesy. I just think that they are going to be realistic with their expectations because it's in their best interest to have adequate parking. And I think you've discussed, especially Jake, of future possible uses. So I think everything's been taken into account. So
Yep.
Moving on.
So, all right. So appeal number 2023-022, which I already read in. Liza, would you like to?
Actually, we're gonna do the same show here. So I'm gonna give it back to Amanda and then I'll wrap up with talking about the variance request.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk through our signage variance request, and I'm going to start with the building signage criteria that we submitted, and then I'll talk separately about the pylon signage. So obviously another critical part of just trying to lease the center, again, trying to establish these regulations so that our tenants have an understanding of what's allowed. Our understanding just from past is that tenants have actually approached this board on their own, trying to seek out their own variances to get more signage than what's allowed in the base zoning. So what we're trying to do is avoid that. Obviously not a great use of you guys' time, but just establishing a set of criteria so that tenants understand upfront what's allowed, what's not allowed, and they can design to that and then submit directly for a building permit for signage with something that is consistent with a board approved set of criteria. Our process internally, we have a design team that works with each tenant. They'll submit their sign shops. It'll be reviewed against what is called our tenant design manual, which specifies all sorts of different things from attachment details to storefront details. We're very finicky about the way that our centers look. So we go through that process either way, and the idea would then be that this municipally approved set of criteria would become part of that review process, and we would work with tenants to ensure that they are designing signage that's consistent with what was approved. So included in the criteria was this location map. We thought it was helpful, again, just conceptually to see how we anticipate this to lay out, caveated obviously with phase 2 being under development and a lot of the center being under leasing right now. So it's definitely possible that what we're showing is a smaller space now that's vacant could be combined with the space next door, or what we're showing as a larger space could be demised into smaller spaces. The idea would be that the signage criteria is tied to the size of the space. So this is really conceptual to kind of show you how we think it will lay out, but these colors could change if some of these spaces are demised differently. So just wanted to make that part clear. So we've associated and are proposing criteria for tenants in different ranges, less than 8,000 square feet, those 8,000 to 40,000 square feet, and then for location C, we're more than 40,000 square feet. The other thing that I'll point out here is in gray is what we're referring to as multi-facade tenants. Those are tenants that have frontage that faces the interior drive aisles as well as some of these exterior roads. Obviously, we're a center that has frontage and presence on multiple roads, so we're proposing that those tenants would be allowed to put signage on multiple sides of their building. So just walking through this for the location tenants that are less than 8,000 square feet, our proposal would be that these tenants would be allowed 100 square feet of signage, including one primary sign and one blade sign. Illumination is actually consistent with what's in the zoning bylaw right now, but we're just including that so that it's a comprehensive outline of everything that would be allowed and approved by the board. In terms of dimensions, we are proposing a maximum sign height of 3 feet, as well as a maximum depth of 3 inches, again, just based on signage that we've worked on with tenants of this size. We are also, for the smaller tenants, proposing an offset from the lease lines, so the edges of the storefront, as well as an offset from the top and bottom of where their sideband would be located, just to ensure that a really small tenant isn't trying to take up the entire storefront with a sign, which is important for these smaller tenants and important for us because we want it to feel tasteful and to the scale of what their storefront linear footage is. For multi-facade tenants that fall within this square footage, we're proposing that that allowable sign area would go up to 150 square feet to allow them to put a smaller secondary sign on an alternate facade, or if they're a 4-sided building, they would have an opportunity to put signage on multiple facades and multiple sides of their building. The next location, which is 8,000 to 40,000 square feet, we're proposing a total allowable signage area of 225 square feet and allowing primary signs per architectural entrance. So in some cases, some of the larger tenants in this group might have 2 entrances on one side of their storefront, and we're proposing that they'd be allowed to put a sign over each. Again, for multi-facade tenants, that they would have the opportunity to put signage on multiple sides of the building that front either the interior drive aisles or the main roads that surround the center. And for this group, also increasing the maximum sign height to 6 feet and the maximum depth to 6 inches. And then the third location would be tenants that are more than 40,000 square feet. In this case, we've increased our request to 350 square feet. Same idea, which you can see here in the rendering, that they'd be allowed to have a sign over both of their entrances if they do have multiple entrances. And also for multi-facade tenants that they'd be allowed to place signage on multiple sides. In this case, we've also increased the maximum sign height to about 10.5 feet, and the maximum depth remains at that 6 inches. I'm showing this in particular because Floor and Decor is the tenant that is closest to opening in the center. I think they were referred to earlier on that end cap. And I wanted to just kind of show you how the requirements that I just laid out for location C would work in real life. So these signs are complying with what I proposed. They would have a main sign over their main entrance, which faces the interior drive aisle and main parking area. And then they would have a smaller sign on the side facing Barnstable Road, which designates where their customer pickup entrance is. So again, just kind of to give you an idea of what this would look like on a tenant of this size. And then lastly, blade sign design criteria. We think it's really important that tenants have an opportunity to put up a blade sign and always encourage that, especially from a pedestrian point of view. It's the easiest way to identify where a storefront is, where the entrance is, when you're walking perpendicular to the stores. So we are proposing that each tenant be allowed to have a blade sign. The only real difference here is that we want to mount them slightly higher than what's allowed in the base zoning, and that's really due to the design of the main building. We're trying to align these signs with the top of awnings that we've proposed, and we also have sconces along the building that are about 10 feet, so we're trying to clear those as well. And I'll also mention the max area that we're setting for that is 6 square feet.
Can I ask a very quick question just on the last slide? Are you illustrating the maximum sign height on that floor and decor?
This is a little bit less. I want to say that well, I can actually pull it for you exactly if you can hold on 1 second, sorry. So their main sign here is 290 square feet. So that one
I
over
see it in
the
gray.
door.
I see it in gray. It's 10 foot 2
Yeah.
inches. Yeah, okay. So that's,
And then I think that the sign on the side is 25 square feet. So their total is about 315.
okay, but the height of that floor and decor is 10 foot
The
2
height
inches.
is the maximum. Yeah.
And you're proposing a maximum of 10 foot 6 inches. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
And I don't know, previously, we've worked closely with Floor and Decor. They had multiple signs. They had the tile, the wood, and the stone sort of laid out across, and we had encouraged them to combine that into one. So obviously that has an effect on the height, but just felt like it was a cleaner look than having multiple signs across the front. So that kind of drives the height in this case. So now I can launch into pylon signs unless you want to pause and talk about the building signage. Just let me know.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, you can continue. I think that's fine.
Okay. All right, so then for proposed pylon signs, obviously what we're trying to do is sort of twofold. We want to give visibility to our tenants. The main building is pretty far set back from the main drive, Route 132. And we also want to try to combine a lot of the existing freestanding signs that exist on property today. If you're familiar with the site, many of the tenants have their own individual freestanding signs, and I'll kind of walk you guys through those. So what we're proposing is 3 total pylon signs. One would be the primary sign, which would be a larger sign, and then 2 secondary signs. So we have a pretty significant amount of linear square feet along Route 132, about 1,500 square feet. And then these entrances are pretty far apart. This is about 600 feet, and this is about 500 feet. So we're trying to basically flag the entrances to the property and also at the same time allow that additional visibility to tenants, which is really valuable in terms of leasing and filling out the center. So these are the 3 proposed locations. And I just wanted to walk you through sort of what the existing pylons look like on site. So many of you might be familiar with this Kmart pylon. Today, the Kmart panel is no longer there, but the structure is still there and the paper store panel is still there. This is located approximately where we are proposing to put our main pylon. We're actually going to push the main pylon a little further back so that it's more settled into the landscaping, but basically in this same location and at the same entrance. Also, IHOP has their own freestanding sign on site right now, which is comparable in size to our existing secondary pylon. But again, we're just trying to consolidate all of this so that we have a nice branded tenant panel that really speaks to the landing as a whole as a uniform shopping center. And these are the other two that exist on site today for pylons, with the Tiki Port restaurant having their own, as well as Ella's Bakery pylon, which remains from when they were on site as well. And then in addition to those, we do have two monument signs on site, which are mounted on the landscape walls at the main entrance. So we would also be getting rid of those and sort of consolidating the branding and the new name of the center into the pylon sign. Again, just wanted to show you a couple of examples of pylons from other properties throughout Massachusetts. These are similar size pylons to what we're proposing. The Derby Street pylon, I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, in Hingham is about 41 feet. Legacy Place, this is one that was recently approved and shortly to go under construction at about 36 feet. And then Mansfield Crossing, which is a 35-foot high pylon that's actually was just demoed, and we are putting in a very large pylon there just because the location is off on the highway. It's about 60 feet. This is a rendering of what the main pylon would look like. We tried to render it both daytime, nighttime, so you kind of get the sense of what the illumination will look like as well. Again, just push back a little bit into that landscaped island from where the current Kmart pylon is located. But the idea would be that it would be part of the landscaping, well branded. You'd know that you were coming to the landing at Hyannis, and then there would be individual tenant panels on the pylon. In terms of the illumination, it would be pushed through acrylic letters with internal edge illumination, which is similar to what you see at Cape Cod Mall across the street. And then just a side-by-side comparison here. Current existing primary pylon versus proposed primary pylon, and then just some of the details of the design, trying to use similar materials to what we're using on the new facade throughout the development to keep it consistent and on brand with this curved painted metal molding that we're using in a lot of the facade bump ups in the development as well. Our understanding, we had sort of vetted this with the planning department ahead of time, was that it would be a requirement to have this be a monochromatic sign. So we are proposing white panels, black writing. We would just ask that tenants be allowed to use their own fonts and expressive logos so that they are recognizable on the panels. And then for secondary pylons, just showing you sort of comparable in height to the existing IHOP pylon that's on site right now, is basically a smaller version of that larger pylon, coming down to the 25 feet, 3 inches, but same material, same idea, will be part of the landscaping. And then just a note that we would want to move forward with putting up a main pylon right away. That would be easily done as part of the first phase of work. The secondary pylons would likely need to wait to be installed just because we're working through that second phase of work, which I showed you on screen, and also sort of the tenanting and re-tenanting of the center. So those would likely be installed later, just in terms of logistics. And then this is just a total sign area comparison. Again, trying to consolidate all of those existing pylons, move away from them and bring them into these 3 combined pylon signs for the property.
Yep.
And lastly, across the street, just showing you for context, the 2 Cape Cod Mall pylons, as well as the illumination, just so you can get an idea, because we would be using the same style of illumination. So Liza, I don't know if you want to jump in and kind of run through the relief.
I'd be happy to. So we have submitted a variance application. The chairman, in reading the notice, referenced the sections from which we are seeking relief in order to effectuate this signage package. I would just note, and I think the staff report notes this as well, that this approach of having this cohesive, coordinated signage package is something that frankly, this board has requested for this property in prior decisions, and also the town's planning department, once WS started talking about redevelopment options, also really asked WS Development to come up with this package to present to approach signs in a coordinated fashion and move away from this sort of piecemeal approach to seeking relief from the ordinance's sign requirements. as also noted in the staff report, there have been a handful of signage decisions on this property, variance decisions granted by the board to allow for signs in excess of what the zoning ordinance limits it to. In reviewing those prior decisions, the board found the requisite variance criteria for the first prong in terms of the unique conditions. The board has already found that the topography on this site is unique. In one of its decisions, it notes that it's approximately 6 to 10 feet higher than the roadways, and that topography obstructs the visibility of signs from the roadways. And in fact, in the 1999 137 variance decision, the board found in finding number 5 that the unusual topography has created a situation under which a sign which complies with the height requirements of the zoning ordinance would barely be visible to persons in automobiles coming from the west towards Hyannis on Route 132. And that's a quote from a prior finding of this board. In addition, this board has already also found that the unique shape of this property, being a very large center with a significant amount of roadway frontage, multiple roadway frontages, and curb cuts, was a unique characteristic of the property in terms of its shape. And also the shape and location of the main structure being set so far back from Route 132 has also been cited to by this board in support of finding the variance criteria satisfied in prior sign applications. In addition, the board also found in terms of the shape and location of the site that the intervening frontage buildings also obstruct sight lines to the larger building in the rear. In terms of the second prong, again, the board in the prior variance decisions also found that these unique conditions and lack of visibility create such that a literal enforcement of the signage requirements results in a substantial financial hardship, as the board has found that compliant signs do not provide adequate visibility for the large property with multiple tenants. And finally, the third prong, which I think is the one that's really for discussion here, because it relates to the particular proposal in terms of what signs are being proposed, is that of no substantial detriment. And as it relates to the pylon, I would suggest, as Amanda walked through, this proposal results in fewer pylon and monument signs on the property. You're going from 4 pylons and 2 monuments existing to 3 proposed. So you're cutting that number in half without increasing the overall amount of square footage of that signage. In addition, it's a significant aesthetic improvement with a new coordinated design that significantly reduces the amount of visual clutter as you go down Route 132 as compared to current conditions. With respect to the building signage, as Amanda walked through, this is a thoughtful and cohesive approach to that signage that's based on the size of the tenants and their location within the center, creating a specific configurations for each tenant, again, based on how big of space they use and where they're located. In addition, I would suggest it's, again, an overall aesthetic improvement, having this coordinated package of signs that would dictate what can happen on the site. And the sizes of the signs in terms of the square feet and the height, again, are different based on the tenant spaces. And so it results in a more architecturally aesthetic design for each facade, again, recognizing that different tenants have different size facades within the plaza. And finally, it results in predictability for the tenants and for the town and for this board to not continuously be approached seeking additional variances from the sign requirements of the ordinance. Again, with this request, as well as, again, the special permit on the parking, we do have some comments on the draft conditions of the staff report when it's appropriate, but otherwise I will pause and we'd be happy to try and answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Attorney Cox and Amanda. I mean, again, I wish we had a SCROD sort of district here, but we don't. So it's before us to handle this versus the council. but I think it makes sense. You know, we've had those other retailers come in trying to change their signs. I think some of them to comply look kind of out of place and incoherent with the rest of the property. So, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think it was well thought out. Just one question on Amanda, what you mentioned about floor and decor, if they wanted to have this sign sort of extended across the front, do these parameters limit that from happening, or that was just something you guys made a choice to not allow? Like, could they have done that based on your parameters?
Yeah, so if I flip back, hold on, just to reference it. They would be allowed to have one sign per architectural entrance, right? So they wouldn't be able to place signs over where there's simply glazing or windows.
Okay. Perfect. Other board members, questions?
You know, Amanda, on this slide here, for instance, the floor and decor, how does that compare with the current sign regulations?
So the current sign regulations are pretty limiting. You're allowed up to 100 square feet. I think there's also a linear footage for smaller tenants, but in this case, floor and decor would be looking at 100 square feet as their maximum, which is why they wanted to get a variance because it would be out of scale with the amount of linear footage that they have for their store.
Okay, so this proposed signage here for floor and decor exceeds the current signage requirements.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have is, if you have a new store, excuse me, a new store that needs signs, does it still have to be approved by the building commissioner?
Yes. Yeah. So the idea is that rather than you first being approached for a variance and then them going to the building department for a sign permit, we would pre-approve this set of criteria and be able to show that to the tenants so that they have to design to it. And I know there's also a check that once it gets to the building department, they would ensure that it's consistent with the criteria as well. So.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Amanda, was there any discussion about any directional signs or any requirements on directional signs, or we don't think they're going to be any necessary for the development?
That's a good question. I mean, in the future, it may be something we'll want to consider as stores open and we see how the property functions and we have the full phases built out. At this point, we are not proposing directional signage, however.
Okay. Any other board members with questions? All right, if there's no questions, we'll open public comment on this item as well, which is 2023-022. I don't believe we received any comments. Is there anyone here from the public to speak to this? All right. Seeing none, I will make a motion to close public comment on 2023-021 and 022. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Herb Bodenseek, this is to close public comment.
In favor.
Paul Pinard.
In favor.
Mark Hanson.
In favor.
Aaron Webb.
In favor.
And I am also in favor, so that closes public comment on both items. Brings it back to the board for discussion or findings. I mean, I don't see any issues here. I mean, Attorney Cox, do you want to just, maybe we'll start with the first one in 021. What would you want to see amended on the staff report?
Yep, we have a slide that shows that. So Amanda, if you don't mind pulling that up.
Sure.
Okay, great. So what this does is it has the conditions of the staff report and then shows language proposed to be stricken and language proposed to be added. So for the first condition, just this really doesn't change anything. It just clarifies the language, and rather than having this be sort of drafted as a finding, it's drafted more as a condition. So just affirmatively stating that the overall shopping center parking ratio for the property shall not be less than 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of shopping area. And then, the last sentence in that first condition I don't feel strongly about, but again, that feels more like a finding than a condition, which is why I had proposed that that be stricken. With respect to condition 2, we're asking the board to consider striking that in its entirety. As we discussed, the plan that we showed is very conceptual in nature. It's, footprints may change, locations may change a little bit. One of the key considerations in seeking this special permit was to allow for us to plan for that second phase of development. And so since we're not seeking relief for the buildings themselves, we're asking the board to strike that condition. Similarly with condition 4, I know this is a condition that the board frequently puts in for development on undersized lots. This is not an undersized lot. And again, because the plan that we showed you was conceptual in nature, that is not intended to represent full build out of the property. Obviously, the parking ratio would be one consideration in terms of full build out of the property, but the conceptual plan that we presented, again, was not intended to show, definitively what would be constructed on the site. And again, if something that is proposed to be constructed on the site triggers a requirement to come to this board, we would come to this board. So that doesn't preclude us from having to come back to the board if that language isn't in there. To the extent something that's proposed doesn't meet the dimensional requirements or independently requires a use relief, we would have to come back to this board anyway. And then finally, with respect to condition 5, I'm proposing to add a sentence at the end that just confirms that the decision becomes vested and exercised once it's recorded. And so at that point, that would be the ratio that would then start to apply to the center.
Okay. Just 2 questions of that. Do we have a maximum square footage including phase 2, or you don't, that's still undetermined what the maximum retail square footage should be?
Yeah, that's still, it's undetermined, but the same what Liza said, if we were to exceed a certain amount, we would have to go through all sorts of different reviews. So we would definitely have to follow a procedure for how that would go.
And I guess the only other thing that I guess I would ask if you're comfortable with, that no underground parking or under building parking would be allowed without coming back to the board to meet the ratio.
I think that's fine.
Okay. I mean, again, you come back to the board. I don't know where we're going in the future, but I just wouldn't want it to get, we're just building up to slide parking under to meet the ratio or something of that nature. Any other board members have thoughts on the proposed modifications to the conditions or any other conditions or really findings?
Are we speaking to both or just the first?
Let's just do the first here. Does anyone, any comments? Does anyone want to make findings? No, no one?
I'll make findings on the second.
Okay, I'll do the first one. All right. In appeal number 2023-021, Cape Town Plaza LLC has applied for a special permit pursuant to section 24057A and C, circumstances warrant reduction of requirements. The applicant seeks to establish an overall shopping center ratio for the property of 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of shopping center closed floor area. The subject property is located 790 INO Road, Hyannis, Mass, as shown on Assessor's Map 311 as parcel 092. It's located in the Business B, Highway Business HB zoning district. I would make findings that the application falls within a category specifically accepted in the ordinance for a grant of a special permit. After evaluation of all the evidence presented, the proposal fulfills the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance and would not represent a substantial detriment to the public good or the neighborhood affected. We feel that this, works within the lot and the proposed uses of the lot. A site plan has been reviewed and found approval with conditions. See letter dated February 7th, 2023. There will be additional site plan review for phase 2 that would have to be found approvable. Such uses do not substantially adversely affect the public health, safety, welfare, comfort, or convenience of the community. I'll add we're just changing the parking here. We're not having any effect on ingress, egress, traffic flow of that nature. That would be handled by site plan review and other town departments. The building and site design are consistent with Section 240-25E district-wide design and performance standards applicability within the highway business district. The proposed alterations and expansion are not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. I think it actually contributes to sort of the aesthetics and handles the parking load more aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood. So those are my findings and motion to approve. I need a second.
I would add to that, Jake, that we also are influenced by the Institute of Traffic Engineering proposals reflection with respect to what they propose for a pedestrian type mall, which is a new usage mall that exists today there.
Mm-hmm. And comparable to their other existing properties and historical usage and parking requirements.
Right.
Thank you, Paul. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, a second, Mark Hansen. And then we have proposed conditions, which are, I'll read them in as edited. Special permit number 2023-021 is granted to Cape Town Plaza LLC for a special permit pursuant to section 240-57A and C, circumstances warranting reduction of requirements. The overall shopping center parking ratio for the property shall not be less than 3.5 parking space per 1,000 square feet of shopping center gross floor area. We're going to strike the original number 2. So the new second one will all site plan review conditions of approval are hereby incorporated into this decision. And I guess, Attorney Cox, if you're okay to add, with phase 2, there will be additional site plan review conditions that will need to be approved.
That's fine. Yep.
And then we're going to strike number 4. Number 4 becomes 5 becomes 4. Decision shall be recorded in the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, and copies of the recorded decision shall be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals Office and the Building Division prior to issuance of a building permit. The rights authorized by this special permit must be exercised within 2 years unless extended. The decision shall be deemed exercised and vested upon recording of the decision. And then I'm going to add one additional that all parking will be surface parking. No underground parking will be considered in the calculation of the 3.5 unless permission sought from this board. Those are my conditions. Do we have a second on the conditions?
I'll second that.
All right, and a roll call vote. Per Bodenseek,
In favor?
Paul Pinard,
In favor.
Mark Hansen,
In favor.
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
and I am also in favor. So, Attorney Cox, we've approved this special permit 2023-021, and now we can deliberate or make findings for 2023-022.
And I do, Mr. Chairman, I do have a
Yep.
couple of requested edits on the conditions of that decision too, when it's appropriate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good. So I sort of styled this one a little bit differently. No suggested edits to the first draft condition. For the second draft condition, I had proposed striking it only because it didn't include the entire signage package that was submitted with the application. And so I proposed to reword condition 2 as shown in red on the screen to say the site signage shall be constructed in substantial accordance with the following materials submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then I referenced the 2 documents that were submitted. The first one is the signage package, the pylon signage package, and the second one is the tenant building signage criteria, largely what Amanda walked through this evening. For condition, draft condition number 3, a proposed edit under the first bullet point under location A. So currently, the staff report condition says total signage area per tenant 100 square feet, which is correct. except the criteria also says that for multi-facade tenants that have more than one facade fronting on a primary vehicular roadway or major interior drive may have up to 150 square feet. So that one clause edit at the end of that first bullet point. And then the draft conditions, again, have additional wording under location A, location B, location C, no changes to those in the staff report. But I also wanted to add with respect to the pylon signs, there was nothing in the conditions pertaining to the pylon signs. So again, this is essentially exactly the materials that Amanda walked through tonight with respect to the primary and the two secondary pylon signs. And then finally, at the end of condition 4, just clarifying that this decision is deemed exercise and vested for the entire property upon the issuance of the first signage permit in accordance with the relief authorized herein. So once that first permit is issued for the signs, the decision vests as it relates to the whole property and all future signage permit requests.
Okay. Attorney Cox, is the proposed floor decor, whatever it is, floor and decor, they're within all of this? You feel comfortable they're going to comply with it as it is? That's
my understanding. I'll let Amanda chime in. I know she's looked at that more carefully, but yes, I believe that is the case. Amanda,
Yep.
Do you want to?
Yes, so they did have obviously more signage proposed, so we worked with them to modify it and make sure that it would be aligned with our criteria. So what I showed you tonight is aligned with locations of over 40,000 square feet for their signage.
Yeah, I think we've been asked for this for a long time by retailers there, so I think it's great that it's coming forward. So I'm in support of it. Any other board members have any thoughts or questions, or want to make findings?
Oh, I can make findings. I think at this point, I mean, the topography of this place and just the sheer size of it, and where these buildings set so far back, I mean, I don't see how you really can expect them to use signage that you could barely read from the street if they fell under current conditions.
Are we addressing anything with temporary signs, Amanda or Attorney Cox? Is there any? We seem sort of silent to it, so.
No, we haven't included anything on temporary signs here. We would, if a tenant needed temporary signage, they would go through the process outlined in base zoning.
Okay. And that would be the same thing with like window decals and such, things of that nature?
Yes, if that counts as a sign, I'd have to look back to see like there's some that's allowed by right, I think, based on a certain percentage of glazing or a certain size.
Okay. Mark, go ahead if you're ready.
Yeah, I apologize if I muddle through this a little bit, just based on the proposed changes, but I'm going to give it a go here. Cape Town Plaza LLC has petitioned for a variance pursuant to section 24065A. And I'm sorry, this is with regard to variance number 2023-022 Cape Town Plaza LLC, section 240-65A through E and H, signs in the B, UB, HB, HO, and SD1 zoning. Cape Town Plaza LLC has petitioned for a variance pursuant to section 240-65A through E and H, signs in B, UB, HB, HO, S&D, and SD1 districts. Petitioner seeks to establish comprehensive site-wide tenant building and pylon signage criteria to regulate total allowable signage area, location, and illumination for what is to be known as the landing at Hyannis. The subject property is located at 790 Iona Road, Hyannis, Mass. Petitioner states the signage criteria outlined would regulate, pardon me, total allowable signage area, location, and illumination. This would create a comprehensive approach to signage, the landing, and prevent individual tenants from coming in with frequent sign variance applications, as has historically been done. According to the plan, the applicant requests total signage area per tenant 100 square feet, internally illuminated face lit, halo lit, exposed LED, source lit, or extremely lit signs are required. Max sign height 3 feet. Max width varies. Sign shall be minimum of 12 inches offset from tenant's lease line and a minimum of 6 inches offset from top and bottom. Max depth 3 inches. In locations Bs, the total signage area per tenant 225 square feet. Internally illuminated, face lit, halo lit, exposed LEDs, source lit, or extremely lit signs are required. Max sign height 6 feet. Max width varies. Centered horizontally and vertically over architecture entrance, and max depth 6 inches. Location C, tenancies, total signage area per tenant 350 square feet. Internally illuminated, face lit, halo lit, exposed LED, source lit, or extremely lit signs are required. Max sign height 10 foot 6 inches. Max width varies, centered horizontally and vertically over architectural entrances. Maximum depth 6 inches. The board has reviewed the proposed floor and decor signage for overall compliance to the comprehensive signing package. Also, staff would like to remind the board that the proposed comprehensive signing package was requested several times over the years by this board. With regard to the variance findings, the statutory requirement of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 10 for granting a variance is a three-pronged test. Board is required to find that each of the following three requirements has been met in order to consider granting the variance. Number one, owing to circumstances related to soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures, and especially affecting such land or structures, but not affecting generally the zoning district in which is located. I find that the topography of this particular parcel and its large scale in size, the elevated topography, which can at times be a hindrance to reading signs from street level, the physical location of current buildings set back off the street show that this is a legitimate concern. Number two, a literal enforcement of the provisions of the zoning ordinance would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioners. Find that again, because of the elevated topography, working within the current constraints of signage and the distance at which some of this signage would need to be read would pose a financial hardship to potential tenancies, whereby they would not get the exposure required to adequately advertise their buildings and their businesses. Number three, desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the zoning ordinance. I find, and we find, that there would be no detrimental effect. In actuality, there would be fewer signs as far as the pylon signs are concerned. And working with town planning department, they would be working with them to show a coordinated and cohesive design along the 132 corridor, and that it would be aesthetically a much more pleasing design and look for this property.
All right, so we have a motion to approve 2023-022 from Mark. I need a second.
You know, second, Paul.
Paul seconds. Roll call vote. Herb Bodenseek,
In favor.
Paul Pinard,
You in favor?
Mark Hanson,
In favor?
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
and I am also in favor. Mark, do you have proposed conditions to go along with the approval?
I do. Sorry. I have suggested conditions. I'm just going to read them. Number one, variance number 2023-22 is granted to Cape Town Plaza LLC pursuant to section 240-65A through E and H. Signs in B, UB, HB, HO, SND, and SD1 districts to establish comprehensive statewide tenant building and pylon signage criteria to regulate total allowable signage area, location, and illumination for the landing at Hyannis located at 790 Iana Road, Hyannis, Mass. Strike as shown in staff report number 2 and replaced with the site signage shall be constructed in substantial accordance with the following materials submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Subsection 1, the landing at Hyannis, Barnstable, Mass. Proposed pylon signs dated 7/31/23 consisting of 11 pages. Subsection 2, the landing at Hyannis tenant building signage criteria dated July 2023 consisting of 7 pages. And then in number 3, location A, total signage area per tenant, 100 square feet, except that multi-facade tenant spaces that have more than one facade fronting on a primary vehicular roadway or major interior drive may have up to 150 square feet. Pylon signs in addition, location A, also, total signage area per tenant, 100 square feet, internally lit, maximum sign height 3 feet, maximum width varies. Sign shall be minimum of 12 inches offset from tenant's lease line, a minimum of 6 inches offset from top and bottom, max depth 3 inches. Location B, total signage area per tenant, 225 square feet, internally illuminated. Max sign height 6 feet, maximum width varies, centered horizontally over architectural entrance, max depth 6 inches. Location C, total signage per tenant, 350 square feet, internally illuminated, face lit, halo lit, max sign height 10 foot 6 inches, max width varies, centered horizontally and vertically over architectural entrance, max depth 6 inches. The pylon signs, in addition to the total tenant signage areas listed in locations A, B, C, above, the following freestanding signs are permitted. Primary pylon sign, 507.5 square feet of signage area, height not to exceed 35 feet, width not to exceed 14.5 feet. Secondary pylon sign number 1, 296.7 square feet of sign area, height not to exceed 25 foot 3 inches, width not to exceed 11 foot 9 inches. Secondary pylon sign number 2, 296.7 square feet of signage area, height not to exceed 25 foot 3 inches, with not to exceed 11 foot 9 inches. And number 4, this decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, and copies of the recorded decision shall be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals office and the Building Division prior to issuance of a building permit. The rights authorized by this variance must be exercised within 1 year unless extended. The decision, and we will add, the decision shall be deemed exercised and vested for the entire property upon the issuance of the first signage permit in accordance with the relief authorized herein.
All right, so roll call vote to approve 2023-022 with the proposed conditions from Mark. Herb Bodenseek,
I'm in favor.
Paul Pinard,
In favor?
Mark Hanson,
I'm in favor.
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
and I'm also in favor. So Attorney Cox, Amanda, you guys have your new sign regulations. Thank you guys for the work to put it together. I think it was long overdue for that parcel and plaza there. So I appreciate you guys working on it, and I assume staff probably did some work to help make it all happen too. So thank you to all of them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
All right, so moving on, I am going to recuse myself from 2023-023 and 2023-024. So I'm going to hand the meeting over to Herb Bodenseek. Herb, you have the floor.
Okay. Let me get my notes together here. Okay. I thought I was ready, but of course, as usual, I'm not. Boy, is my face red. Okay. New business, having completed old business. Appeal number 2023-23, Michael and Florence Dowd have applied for a special permit in accordance with section 240-92B, non-conforming buildings or structures used as single and two-family residences. The applicants seek to renovate the pre-existing non-conforming structure by adding 1,940 square feet for a total proposed gross floor area of 4,435 square feet. The lot contains 9,600 square feet where 1 acre is required. The existing structure is non-conforming to setback requirements with 12.4 feet front setback where 30 is required, 0 feet side and 0 feet rear setbacks where 15 is required. The proposed expansion will maintain the existing non-conforming setbacks. The subject property is located at 29 Lafayette Ave, Hyannis, Mass, as shown on Assessor's Map 287 as parcel 045. It's located in the Residence RF1 zoning district. I will assign members, myself, Paul Pinard, Mark Hansen, Aaron Webb, and Manny Alves.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah,
Yes.
I have a question here on what you just read. What I don't understand is the zero feet side and 0 rear setbacks.
Oh, yeah, if you look at the site current existing condition site plans, they are currently at 0.
I can explain that, Paul.
Okay, then maybe that's part of your presentation because
It is, yes.
There's a
okay.
garage, Paul,
I
that's set on the lot lines.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, thank you.
Okay. So, Attorney Lawler, would you like to speak on this?
I'd love to.
Oh,
Thank
there
you.
was a note on the, on the, I guess it's a revised version of the staff report. It says that there are 2 structures on the property and the principal dwelling is the only structure proposed for alteration. The principal dwelling has existing setbacks of 12.4 feet in front, 13.8 rear, and 22.5 side setbacks. And again, the total proposed increase is 1,940 square feet.
Yep.
Attorney Lawler.
Thank you. Good evening. Anna, would you be able to pull up the site plan? So in making this presentation, we're seeking approval for an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming residential structure. And as I just stated, if you look at the particular lot, technically the existing back sideline is 0 in that's where the present garage is located. We're not proposing anything in this application to in any way alter or change the garage staying the same as it is. Last week, we just received approval of the plans through historic, and now we're seeking from a standpoint of zoning, the ability to expand the structure approximately 1,900 square feet, actually 1,940 feet to be exact. And the total then would be 4,435. So what we're seeking to do is in the application, we're remaining within the existing footprint. We're not getting any closer with respect to sidelines, though we're expanding outward, and the property does not become more non-conforming with respect to side and setbacks and the like. This is a home in a residential neighborhood with homes of very similar size as proposed. It's in keeping with the neighborhood. It's in keeping with the intent and the spirit of the bylaw. There's been a tremendous amount of work done with respect to the actual elevations to ensure that historic would be pleased with the project, and they were, as I indicated previously. And I can go on and on, with this proposal, but it's a very simple proposal. I know it's already almost 9 o'clock in the evening, and I would entertain questions.
Attorney Lawler, the rear of this proposed addition has no impact on the existing setback, correct?
Well, it's pulling it. It's not getting closer, correct?
That's my question. Okay, now
Yeah.
the side piece, it looks like expanded a couple of feet, but that's still within the 15-foot.
That's within the setback. So it's not becoming any more with respect to the setbacks.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So on that point, Attorney Lawler, currently only a portion of the rear of the home is within that figure 13.5. You're proposing to make the entire
Yes.
property at that. So
and it's also relatively de minimis. It's
okay.
We're talking what just I believe it's 15, so we're going to 13.8. So it's not like we're asking to run it 5 feet from the property line, and that, it's not a, certainly it's it's within the, certainly needs relief. It's not inches where, a building inspector might look the other way or something like an inch or two, but it's a relatively modest request, I submit to you.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I'm just sorry, I'm going to pop back on here for a second. Attorney Lawler, is the majority? I didn't see what this dwelling looked like prior. There's no elevation to see what it looks like. Is it a 1-floor plan going to a 2-floor, or is it just?
It's a 2-floor. When then they're expanding the roof a little bit and putting a dormer on, so
Okay.
2.5. And I wouldn't call it 3. But no, it's a 2-family, and then they're utilizing the attic space, and they're just throwing a small doghouse dormer on there.
The main one is a 2-family, the main dwelling, or
Not 2-family. I'm sorry, 2-story. Did I say
it's a 2-story? Sorry, okay.
I apologize.
And so in the front yard setback, you're a foot inside of that, correct?
Yes.
And did they make any attempt to keep within the boundary? Was there a reason that they had to push on that? All the plans are sideways, so I apologize.
I should have uploaded them myself. I mean, it's again, we're dealing with an older home. And with respect to the front, nothing's changing on the front elevation at all. The existing front remains the same, and that's part of the historic reason. We've kept the entire front identical. We haven't changed anything except the roof line. So there's no. We're not.
So the proposed is showing
all the work's off the back.
It's showing the roof line overhang. Is that what it's showing?
Yes.
So is the actual foundation at 20 feet?
And that's the front is remaining the same, and that was important to historic. The roof line changed a little bit, but the actual the front windows, there's a bay that sticks out. You can see it there in the elevation. That's all pre-existing, non-conforming, and remaining. The addition portion of this project is really off the back, and the roof.
I see. Okay, that was my fault. I was kind of.
I probably should have brought it. I know that it's site. This is more site issues. I probably.
No. Sorry. I understand where it was now. I see that most of it's off the back. I get it.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Mark.
No. I appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, if there are no other questions, we can move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Okay, seeing none, I will move to close public comment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I thought this might come up during public comment. Just for Attorney Lawler, did you have a chance to speak to the neighbor to the back of the garage there? Are there any?
Well, the back of the garage is, like I said, is not being touched, and I personally did not. I know Longfellow Building may have. I'm not positive. I don't know. I do know that this has been heavily advertised, and not only for this hearing, but also historic.
Okay.
And there was no opposition with respect to historic, nor apparently is there any opposition with respect to zoning. And and I do know from doing this for 30 years, these boards take into great consideration neighbors' concerns, and it doesn't seem to be a concern. Again, this proposed is very in keeping with the neighborhood down there in Hyannisport. as not as presently built, but also as proposed, as expanded.
Yeah. Hello, this is Mike Dowd. I'm the homeowner.
The neighbors approve.
And yeah, I mean, the neighbors are all very well aware of what our plans are, what we're doing.
And very happy with the plans.
The garage has been there for who knows how many years. Could be
years.
60, 70, 80 years. It's been sitting on that particular lot line. The in terms of, you know, when you talk about the addition, I mean, really, we're tearing off the back where the roof lines and the rooms are all chopped up and the foundation's chopped up. And, you know, from actually expanding the footprint, you know, it's really not being expanded that much at the physical level, mostly out to the side yard where we're within the setbacks.
Yeah, let me jump in here. This has been properly advertised, that there's been no objection from the neighbors that became public, so let's move on.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, the subject was closing public comment, and I had a second.
Yes, by me. Thank you.
Very good. All right, Herb Bodenseek, I'm in favor. Paul Pinard,
In favor?
Mark Hanson,
In favor.
Aaron Webb,
I'm in favor.
Manny Alves.
In favor.
All right. Okay. Are there any deliberations?
Yeah, well, I was there. Basically, what they're doing is just raising the back of the house up to the level of the front of the house. It's pretty simple construction, pretty simple issue, I think.
I would agree.
And this is a squaring off for design's sake. I mean, they're well within their setbacks there. They're not encroaching any further into the backyard setback. And just from a pure building standpoint, it's just going to be easier. But I have no issue with this.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Excellent. Would anybody like to make findings?
Paul? See how I did that?
Yeah, I saw you did that. Yeah, well, can you get that off the screen so I can bring up my other stuff, please? Or whoever's got that on. There you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, wait a minute, hang on.
Got it.
Okay. This concerns appeal number 2023-023 Dowd. Michael and Florence Dowd have applied for a special permit in accordance with section 240-92B, non-conforming buildings or structures uses as single and two-family residences. The applicant seeks to renovate the pre-existing non-conforming structure by adding 1,940 square feet for a total proposed gross floor area of 4,435 square feet. The lot contains 9,600 square feet, where 1 acre is required. The existing structure is non-conforming to setback requirements. The existing structures are non-conforming to setback requirements with 12.4 feet front setback, where 30 feet is required, 0 feet side and 0 rear setbacks, where 15 is required, and the proposed expansion will maintain the existing non-conforming setbacks. Subject property is located at 29 Lafayette Ave, Hyannis, Mass, as shown as Assessor's Map 287, as parcel 045 is located in the Residence F1 paren RF-1 zoning district. I want to clarify here that.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we say, Paul, please, the existing structure is non-conforming to setback requirements with 12.4 front setback where 30 is required, 22.5 side, and 13.8 rear where 15 is required, and the rest would remain the same, but that's the way we need to say that?
Yep, thank you. I was searching for that. I didn't have that.
It's in the proposal and relief requested.
Let's see. I find that the application falls within a category specifically accepted in the ordinance for a grant of a special permit. Section 240-92B allows for the alteration of a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot. I find a site plan review is not required for single-family residential dwellings. I find that after evaluation of all the evidence presented, the proposal fulfills the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance and would not represent a substantial detriment to the public good or the neighborhood affected. To wit, the Historic Commission has approved it, and this does not increase any more of the nonconformity of the rear of the principal residence, which is the subject here. The proposed alteration, I find the proposed alteration would not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing dwelling. Those are my findings.
Would anybody like to second those findings?
Second.
I'd say all in favor, but we're not live, so I will run down the list. Paul Pinard,
Favor?
Mark Hanson,
I'm in favor.
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
Manny Alves,
I am in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. Attorney Lawler, do you have you reviewed the conditions,
Yes,
and do you agree with those?
We do agree with those, yes.
Thank you.
I'm always in agreement.
You're an agreeable guy.
That's not true.
From our perspective, let's say it is. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
You know, the special conditions associated with this are conditions 1 through 5 on whatever the date. Somebody help me here.
It is September 14th, 2023.
September 14th. Staff report, September 14th, special conditions 1 through 5. Those are my findings.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Paul Pinard,
In favor?
Mark Hanson,
I'm in favor.
Aaron Webb,
I'm in favor.
Manny Alves,
In favor.
and I am in favor. You have your special permit.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Really do.
Why don't you stick around for the next one?
I'm gonna hang out. I like to hang out and chat, and you know.
Please. Great.
Good luck, Mr. Dowd.
Appeal number 2023-24, Sawyer Realty Holdings LLC. Sawyer Realty Holdings LLC has petitioned for a variance pursuant to section 240-24 1.4b 1K, non-conforming use, and 240-24 17D1C, multi-unit dwelling. The petitioner seeks to convert 20 existing hotel rooms into 20 studio apartments. The requested use and use density is not permitted in the DN zoning district. The subject property is located at 473 Main Street, Hyannis, as shown on Assessor's Map 308 as parcel 084. The parcel is located in the downtown Main Street DMS district and the downtown neighborhood DN zoning district. The existing structure seeking relief is in the downtown neighborhood DN zoning district. Mr. Attorney Lawler.
Hello. We have a team on this one. If everybody wants to jump in, or I can introduce, whatever's easiest.
Yeah, please introduce.
Mr. Chair, you should assign members.
Oh, yeah. I will sign myself, Paul, Mark, Aaron, and Larry.
May I ask why I'm not being assigned anything tonight when I have the most tenure of the associates?
I'll assign you as well.
No, it's just overt discrimination. We have 2 new people on the board, and I'm sitting here for 2.5 hours, and I'm not even invited to participate.
I can blame Jake because he's not here.
Oh, did he make this?
I'm sorry that nothing was intended.
Well, who made the choice? Is this Jake's instruction?
Oh, no, I know the regular members get assigned and then I have to choose. It's really nothing personal.
Well, it sure feels like it.
Okay. Tell you what, you can make findings if you want.
No, I can't believe this goes on.
I really do apologize.
Well, I mean, I've been sitting here for 2.5 hours and I am the most senior of the associates and I don't understand why we're taking everybody but me.
We have no objection to whoever the board is as the applicant, none whatsoever.
I was just trying to include Manny because he's been gone for a while, and then Larry hasn't been on very many cases at all, and I seriously, sincerely apologize.
Okay.
The chair, you can change whatever you want, Herb.
Larry, would you like to sit this one out? Larry is here, isn't he?
I'm trying. Yeah, I had to unmute myself. Yes, I'll sit this one out.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
so let's go ahead.
Again, I'm very, very sorry, Denise. I wasn't really paying attention to who Jake has.
Who's assigned, Herb? Let's go.
Yep. Okay, Attorney Lawler.
So who is assigned?
Who's assigned?
Who was assigned? Myself, Paul, Mark, Aaron, and Denise.
Okay, let's go.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, board, and thanks to Anna for helping all along. I'd like to introduce the team we have. First, I'd like to introduce our developer, Jessica Rosenberg. She's actually, just fantastic to work with and here to answer questions. And I know we have Zach Silver here from the architects, as well as Matt Eddy from engineering. And I'm missing somebody. I know it. Who am I missing?
Devin as well from the architecture team.
Devin, thank you. Sorry, Devin. I'm sorry. So what we're seeking here are a couple of variances as indicated pursuant to 240-24-1B1K, non-conforming use, the multi-del, and then we're also looking to expand to 20 existing motel rooms. Matt, could you pull up the entire site plan, please?
I'm not able to share. I don't know, Anna, if you want to give me the rates to share or if you want to bring it up.
David?
I don't care who brings it up.
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Attorney Lawler, while they're looking that up, I'm in reading the application, was there any clarification as to the 20 units and whether or not they fall under the residential, whether they're one and the same? Like, is any part of this application at this point moot?
No, it's not moot in that because of the new bylaw. I tried with the building commissioner to see if we could avoid this, but after consultation and whatnot, it was determined that we do need relief. And I don't necessarily disagree with Commissioner Florence in that regard.
Okay.
So
I just wanted clarification early. That's all. Thanks.
Yep. No, and I appreciate that. We wouldn't, if that was the case, we wouldn't be here. But I do think that's a great question. If you could expand to the entire portion, I don't know who has control of that right now. This entire lot is really a very unique lot, and it has some history here. And actually, I worked next door in Steve Pizzuti's office for 10 years, right next to this building. And Building E here, where my arrow is, or the arrow right there is what we're focusing on today. But I do want to talk about the entire lot for two reasons. One's because it deals with the uniqueness of the lot and topography in the buildings. But also, I want to explain that we're probably going to, it's not before you today, but I like to give an overview to the board. I don't want to think that we're hiding anything. We want to be totally transparent. It's the intent of the applicant to develop the entire lot, within the next year. And hopefully much sooner than that, getting engineering and plans and architecturals together with the team that we have. It's really a great team. And there's going to be a proposal to tear down some of the buildings and put a much larger building that's going to directly face onto Main Street. And there'll be some closing of some curb cuts and a few other matters. And what the applicant, and that's going to be a mixed use or we're going to try to seek to have a mixed use of residential apartments and maintain the motel use as well for a portion of the property. That's just to give you an overview of where we are in order that we may be completely transparent. So with respect to the entire lot, and I want to get into the variance requirement, the uniqueness and the of this particular lot. Not only does this lot, cross two specific zoning, zoning. I'm losing the word. Areas that where in the main portion, this particular use would be totally allowable, but in the existing zoning, we have to be here in order to have a variance. And what we're seeking is housing. One of the key fundamental desires of planning and the town council is to expand housing. So we're certainly in keeping with zoning and in keeping with the neighborhood and in keeping with the desires of the town with respect to this particular structure. But as it exists now, almost very similar to, so strike that. With this particular building, we're proposing virtually no changes to the actual structure itself. We have to run a water line in order that we may put a fire suppression system if we're approved. Thank you, Matt. But we're going to keep the existing outside structure, other than cleaning it up, painting, and some cosmetic carpentry, identical. And so there'll be no change in footprint, no change in design, no change in roof lines. Really what we're looking at is a change in use. And that particular use is from going from one type of residence, which are motel residents, which do qualify as residents, to apartment residents. So the actual change, though, under the new zoning, they're very particular as to defining what motel is and defining apartments, which under prior zoning, we may have been able to do this as a matter of right. So what we're seeking to do is to take these motel units, living structures into a permanent apartment type rental situation. Because we're adding 20 units, there's the 20% affordable requirement, which we're fully embracing with the town and coordinating and working not only with Anna here in zoning, but also everybody at planning, Elizabeth and Jim as well. And what the intent here is to change the internal structure of the building to accommodate the 20 particular units. With respect to any type of density, we suggest that it's actually less, at least certainly from a zoning standpoint. As far as parking is concerned, the parking requirements for apartments are less than that which presently exist for the motel use. There's more than ample parking spaces for this particular project, this particular phase on the lot. Handicap, regular, everything else, all the parking would remain the same. Now, when it comes to the changes that we propose in 6 months, that's going to be a horse of a different color and maybe looking for some relief in that regard. Again, that's just strictly for the purposes of transparency. We clearly think we meet the requirements as far as topography and shape of the lot. We also believe that this would be a hardship upon the applicant when the letter and documents were signed to start this project. The zoning had not changed. It was also our understanding that this lot was going to be included in the downtown, the DMS zone and not the DN zone. I'm not, changing zoning is an extremely complicated thing for anybody to do. You have to have so many variables, so many different lots. We suggest that because this is one lot, that it probably should have been included in the downtown Main Street zone, which would have been usable as a matter of right, but for whatever reason, it wasn't. And we're seeking here to to fix that issue, and that again would fall to the hardship requirement Lastly, with respect to the relief that we're seeking, housing is certainly not only more it's not more detrimental. It's actually the opposite. It's an extreme benefit to the town, especially this type of smaller units located on Main Street. I'm very active in the bid, which thankfully was just renewed for another 5 years. Part of the, not only the comprehensive plan of the town, but the vision of the bid, having residential follows retail in these particular areas. It's a support of Main Street. It's really this first phase of the project is a tremendous benefit, as is the intended phase 2. And we suggest to you that we meet the variance requirements. As with the last hearing, I'm going to stop talking. I think I've made all my points. It's late, and I'm going to field questions, and I'll ask the team to jump in if they think it's necessary, if I call on them. But any questions you may have, we're here to answer them.
Yeah, hey, Attorney Lawler, has this been through the planning committee department, or does it have to go through that?
It's gone through site plan.
And site plan has approved it?
Yep.
Okay.
There's the issue we talked about. We have to put in the water line for the fire and all that. But that's all the improvements are conditioned on building permits. But yes, they have been approved. Okay.
Given what may or may not happen here, I would like to see the parking defined in this particular variance. So
it's not the parking the parking. Nothing's changing as far as the parking. We're not adding a spot. We're not deleting a spot.
But I don't know how many are assigned to the specific building E. And I would prefer to have that defined, given what may or may not happen to the rest of the property.
Well, if we came back, I didn't want to create confusion with the phase 2. The phase 2 will include parking for the entire. Will include building E as well, with parking for everything.
No,
so
I'm just saying, if you're going to make this a residential, 20 units, how many parking places go with that?
Oh, I mean, right in this particular part in this zoning, there's well over 20. There's if I count them up quickly,
there's
44.
What is the requirement to my question? What's the zoning requirements for the number of parking places?
Speak to that, if I could. The required parking for 20 residential units is 20 parking spaces. There's 1 parking space per unit.
Okay.
There are 44 parking spaces in this lot area here. There's 44, so only 20 of those. So less than half of these spaces, basically right along here, is what's required.
I would like to have included in the variance that, in fact, 20 parking places are allocated to this building. That's all.
Yeah.
Attorney Laurel, I have a future, Paul.
Minimum of 20 places are allocated to this building.
Right, but I don't think we want to specify which parking spaces.
Well, I didn't say which. I'm just saying 20.
The reason, Paul, and I understand your request, and I certainly don't think it's unreasonable by its nature, but since there's going to be a second application and because of the various portions of the bylaw that allow on-street parking and off-site parking and things like that, we would like the flexibility, if at all possible, based upon our intended request for a special permit coming up, to have flexibility to utilize parking for the entire lot for the whole project under the special permit. Because if we all of a sudden take 20 spots out of the total parking, because my understanding is we are going to be seeking parking relief this winter. And by all of a sudden taking 20 spots and just taking them out of the mix, that kind of handcuffs the applicant going forward. And because it's a variance, it's not a special permit. It's a whole, it's a whole different, it's like apples and oranges. You can't you can't combine the two. So I would respectfully request, since there is twice as many spots on this particular lot for the building, and clearly will be serviced, that requirement not be put into the decision if the board is inclined to approve it. I
don't understand, Attorney Lawler. What you're saying is they could develop the rest of it and take all the parking away.
No, they
No,
can't.
because that's not true, because if we develop the rest of it, Building E will be included in that.
If there
Attorney Lawler, can I interrupt here real quick? What I don't understand is what the process here is. Was there conversations amongst your team that why not present the entire project in one fell swoop? Why are we chopping
Because my
this up?
client wants to open this and get housing in it for next spring, and a big project takes a couple of years.
Yeah, to me, again, I'd like to see the entire project put before us in one fell swoop versus chopping it up in this regard, so that we can, differentiate and delineate what is going to be happening all the way around. It's, in my opinion, it's, and I understand their need, but that could easily be the first phase of their project once approved, is to get these units in place. But
Aaron, if I might,
sure.
This is just because we're not changing anything to the building. This is just a change of use. That's it. That's all we're seeking. We're not seeking to do anything. So when the next project comes, everything is on the table to the board. Everything. Parking, use of this building compared to the other uses. So if you think there's too much density, you just don't allow it on the other half of the lot. It shouldn't affect any decision making of this board for the special permit. I find it very important, client's relationship with this board, and that's why I mentioned the second phase of the project, because I didn't want to in any way try to think that we were trying to pull a fast one on you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But I also don't want that to bite me.
I don't think it necessarily will. To me, it's. I guess what I'm sort of afraid of here is that we're going to end up with, again, I don't know how far along this next proposal is.
You can put a condition in there that a special permit will include, utilizing this portion of the lot as fire, and I'll try to think of language, that if any further special permits are considered, that the entire lot shall be looked at as a whole. So, because this is one lot, all we're looking to do is say, hey, we want to get apartments up and running for this spring. We have a team hopefully ready to go in and start renovating, getting a building permit in the next few weeks, and have the housing up and running before, this is great workforce housing and all the other stuff. We want to get it up and running quickly, and then focus our energies on the whole project. But when the real project comes into play, this entire lot is under your purview. So whether it's parking spaces or curb cuts, whatever, all those decisions still are completely in your purview to approve it or not. Otherwise, you just have a building that's, what we're seeking here is just simply to switch 20 motel units, which require a parking space and a half, so 30 parking spaces, to 20 apartments, which only require 20. So we're actually reducing the parking by 30%. So
parking's not necessarily
we're not seeking to do anything.
I understand.
Just a change of use.
Let me ask you my next question, which is, tell me about the units themselves. What are we looking at square footage wise? What's the rehab going to look like? I mean, obviously they're going to include a galley kitchen. I mean, they're motel rooms. So what is one of these units going to look like?
Zach, can you jump in on that?
Sure. The units are around 500 square feet. There's ample space to either make a one bedroom or studio layout within the existing footprint. To meet any ADA compliance, we'd have to renovate the restrooms, gut them completely, make them adequate size. But for the non-compliant units, the footprints of the restrooms can stay the way that they are. So two potential layouts from the screen here in front of you.
So can you explain what we're looking at here? I can't quite figure all this out here. So
to the far right, the studio that's labeled as 478 square feet. The entry is in the bottom right corner. So you have a studio.
Sorry, the right there. Yep, I see that. Yep.
You walk into a studio apartment. You have restrooms in the center, kitchen directly in front, and closet down the end. And all these units are set up with front to back entries. And then to the left would be a 1-bedroom example. So you enter in the corridor. 1 bedroom on your right, 12 by 10. Closet within the bedroom itself. Closet in the unit. This configuration shows an L-shaped kitchenette area with a small seating area. Existing bathrooms renovated.
And just to chime in, all of these units today, all these motel rooms already have 2 means of egress. So that does not need to be added. There's 2 means of egress already, front and back of each unit.
There's no proposed opening modifications to the building itself. The demising walls all stay in place.
Correct.
And there's no elevator service up to the 2nd floor.
That's correct.
No, there's no elevator anywhere on site.
And we'd be submitting a full Chapter 34 code review along with the permit application.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions.
The screen in front of us shows 4 units, correct? So side by side?
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Can't wait to see them. All right.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, so quick question. Is the petitioner, are they applying for any town funding for the affordable units?
That is a good question. Our lender is actually Bank 5, and I actually was meeting with them last week, and they did mention something about that. We were talking about potentially looking into it, but this is certainly not contingent on us getting funds from the town. No.
Okay.
But it was something we could look at.
Is this to satisfy general housing, or is this to satisfy employee type housing, or housing for people to, that are coming down on site to do the build of the potential build of the front structure?
No, so the intention for this is really just year-round folks who live in Hyannis. It's not for, it could be for anyone, but we're not like looking to like master lease this out to like a big company that's seasonal. The point really is year-round housing for people who live in Hyannis.
And I do want to emphasize that of the 20 units, 20%, will be affordable.
And are they going to be deeded as year-round housing?
Yes. Affordable.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my initial.
Is it 10% or 20%?
I don't remember. I know it's 2 units.
The inclusionary, is it 10 or 20?
10%. Inclusionary is 10%. So on
I'm
20
sorry,
units,
I apologize.
I think it's 2 units.
2 units. I'm sorry, you're right. I did my math wrong.
But yeah, there's no like this is not like Airbnb, anything like that.
So it was proposed to site plan as year-round housing.
And what will the lease, what is the average lease going to be in terms of time?
Yeah, so generally speaking, so our management company, we typically won't do less. It's 12-month lease is our standard lease. We don't do month-to-month tenant at will. If somebody wants a longer lease, we will consider that at times, but generally speaking, I would say 98% of our portfolio is 12-month leases.
So that raises a good question. What's to prevent these from being Airbnb?
David, we've done this before in Martha's Vineyard. Like, we're happy to sign like an affidavit or something that has some sort of language that states like this is intended for year-round housing, and we won't be posting on Airbnb. It's just not our business model.
We can put a restriction. You can put a
restriction. It's fine with us. We don't
rentals are more than 60. Nobody's going to rent these small units for 30 days or 60 days.
Well, I'm not supposing what might happen to them. My question is,
We're fine with a restriction on that.
what could happen to them? So what would be, I mean, I'm not familiar with apartment buildings in terms of what the regulations are in the town of Barnstable, okay? And so I just want to prevent these from becoming Airbnbs. So however we do that.
We're more than happy to have you put a restriction on there from short-term rentals.
Absolutely, no problem.
Put it right in the variance.
And then
absolutely
buy them as or they can't rent them as investments and then subcontract as the Airbnb.
No, that
Denise, I'll just speak to that real quick. Denise, we don't allow subletting in our lease agreement. So if somebody rents it from us, they can't turn around and rent it to someone else. And if we found out that they were, we would tell them that they were, not necessarily evicted, but we would have to move them out. We don't allow that.
I'm a little, and I got to apologize to them. I'm a little remiss. I should have, introduced my client a little bit better. She and her family own some very high, own apartments throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they have a very strong track record. I know that I don't want to name specific names, but I know people in the town departments, when I mentioned who my client was, were very excited because, with Jessica and her family, it's not, let me tell you what they're going to do. I can sit there and say, this is what they've done. They have a strong track record.
Well, Attorney Law, let me stop you here because it's late, all right? It's not the intent of the current owner. When we give you a variance, it goes with the property. They could sell it tomorrow.
That's fair.
People could do with it, okay? And so that's what our rulings are always based upon, not what the current use or the current intent is, but what could be the possible use and the possible intent in the third owner past this. And so our questions go into not being familiar, again, with the current zoning or requirements with respect to motels or apartment houses. We would evidently like to see a couple things here. Number one, we don't want short-term rentals. I don't know how to put that into words. I don't want to handicap the owners by saying it has to be a minimum of a year or whatever, but I don't know how to say that, but I think we've got to craft something there. Secondly, I want parking included in the variance. I don't care where the parking is, but I want a note that says there has to be 20 parking places, a minimum of 20 parking places associated with this apartment building. I don't care where you put them. You can have all the flexibility you want, but I want that would be my personal requirement to approve this variance also.
May I ask you this question, Paul, on the parking? We have no issue. I can help craft some language on the short-term rentals. But on the parking, would you be willing to say that the parking on this variance could be altered by a later special permit with the approval of this board? Would you be? Okay.
Of course.
As long as because the variance and a special permit are different animals. I just want to make sure that this variance allows the parking to be altered by this board under a future special permit.
Yeah. What I don't know, Attorney Lawler, and this is my fault, is it once we approve this variance, can you wipe out, a future owner, wipe out all the parking?
Paul, can I speak?
No, this is use only. This is use only. This is only a variance requesting use. I'm not asking for any relief on parking. I'm not asking for anything. I'm asking to keep everything the same. You have a lot that has a couple of 100 and something parking spaces, and they have to service the buildings on the lot.
So what you're saying,
this is use only. This is use only.
Okay, so the apartment building built into the regulations, there is a defined parking requirement, and that goes along with the variance. Is that what I'm hearing?
The parking requirement doesn't change because first of all, it's because of the change of use. This parking is becoming more non-conforming. I mean, more conforming than what presently exists because apartment
listen to my question, please. The current regulations say that if this is a apartment building, then there's a requirement for X number of parking spaces. That's the current law?
Yes.
Yes.
Question.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Current zoning.
Okay, let's move on. Okay.
May I ask, when you referred to phase 2 of this, what is the intention there? What is phase 2?
Phase 2 is to add more apartments, delete some motels. We don't have the specifics down completely yet. But phase 2 is the front portion of the lot to, as consistent with, the design infrastructure plan and some of the plans that the planning board has put forward. We're intending to put a building that's going to abut straight up on Main Street, probably reduce or eliminate that big back building, and then keep some motel use, and then have it a mixed use of motel and a mixed use of residential apartments. There might be a small also component of retail on the first floor on the main building, which is, again, inconsistent with all the new zoning.
Right, that's all right, exactly. All consistent with the new amended zoning and closing of an entrance onto Main Street, which is looked at, as a very positive aspect of that redevelopment as well under the new zoning.
And just if I could speak to that too a little bit, just because just knowing this location. So right now we have before us this one building. There is, as they are stating, a 1 space per unit requirement that does not change regardless of if we change this when it goes to residential. If and only if they choose to do a phase 2, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. They still have to meet that requirement on the lot. The lot is contiguous. If they want to add housing, it still has to meet that minimum. One thing that's important to notice about this particular location, for anybody that's asking, is it's on a corner. There is on-street parking. There's also a lot within a short distance of this property diagonally across the street, which would, if they could put something together, that would suffice as a parking, to help them meet any parking requirements that they might require in any further expansion. But they can't have less than 1 unit per, one parking spot per unit. So really at that point, there's no real risk there. And at this point, they are only asking for this particular building. If they never build out the rest of the lot, this is it. I'm not saying they will or won't, but right now they're not saying they're going to. It's a proposed, which doesn't change anything, but they would have to meet those requirements in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Hans.
Okay. I have a really fundamental question here. At first, when I read this, I was assuming, or let me ask a question before I say what I was assuming. Which building are we talking about? Are we talking about the one on the corner of High School Road and South Street, or the one on High School Road and Main Street?
E here on South Street and High School.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad I understand it correctly. And then my other question is in regard to parking. I'm sorry to beat that horse, but as long as you can tell me that somebody's who's renting an apartment is going to come home at 1 o'clock a.m. or 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 9 o'clock at night, they're always going to be 100% certain they'll have a parking space.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
I don't know how you can say that if we have more than 1 person per unit. I mean, if these start being rented by workers going maybe over to Nantucket or even here, you could have more than 1 person per unit.
Sorry, go ahead.
They only have to meet the requirement. It's 1 space per unit.
Right.
20 units, it's 20 spaces. They can designate them if they want. They can draw letters on the ground.
Yeah.
But they have 100 and how many are there? You're converting, you have 20 motel rooms, you're converting into 20 units potentially, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. We're taking a requirement under present parking. Motel rooms require 1.5 spaces, and we're replacing that with a requirement that only requires 1. So we're actually putting a use in that uses less parking.
And folks, that's just recent. It used to be 1.5. It is now 1.
Correct.
So
depends on the size, actually.
Hey,
I have a
let's
rental
go.
cottage that
One.
is very small that I'm only allowed one car.
Let's go.
And
Come on,
it's
guys.
instead of the unit.
Look, let's go. It's required. They have to have 20. That's
Yes.
what the zoning law says. So
Correct.
let's move on. Okay.
Paul, people are asking questions, Paul. They're free to ask questions.
But let's state the rule, the law that's out there, the zoning law says 20. I don't
Okay,
care.
but they're just asking, but he's just asking a question. So give him a
Well,
chance
let's
to
move-
ask a question. Nobody
That's
interrupts
okay.
when you ask questions.
Yeah, let's move on, okay?
Okay, let's move on when we're ready to move on, Paul. If you're
Thank
not
you,
ready to move on, that's fine. Herb has questions. He should be free to ask them.
Yeah, I just don't know if we need to go to the lengths of requiring you to have a little sign in front of the parking spaces that abut the building that say for tenants only, or, you know, and I'm going to take your word on this, that it's a problem or not a problem, and you're saying it's not, and I won't push the issue, but as long as people are guaranteed a parking space when they get back to their apartment after working at a restaurant down on Main Street, well, they wouldn't be driving then, would they? But anyway.
Is it planned to be functioning as a motel in this next summer?
Portion
It
of
is.
it.
It is the building that we're talking about. No, if approved, the plan would be to do this renovation over the winter so that we could lease these units up and hopefully have them pre-leased by like May or June. Which
Well,
it would be
in that case, I do think it's not a terrible idea to have designated spaces. They don't have to. They can put them wherever they want, but they should be designated because.
And I can speak to that and just
agree with that.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just about to say, generally speaking, we do that just so it's easier. Even if it's even in our apartment complexes where there's like tons of spaces, generally speaking, when you move in, we stripe them, we give you the number. So that way we know if there's overflow and if there's, we still have more spaces than we need for the hotel and these apartments. But that is what you just described, Mr. Hanson. Sorry, I don't know your first name. That is our general practice, that we would stripe them and they would be assigned.
Okay, let's add that to the conditions then.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Cool.
That's totally fine.
All right.
And then I don't think there's any requirement for this, but I'm just curious about who your tenants are going to be. It seems like a great location for workers that, waitresses and things like that on Main Street and elsewhere. Is this going to be affordable for people like that?
It's the housing laws are, you got to be really careful. The affordable units have to meet certain requirements.
Correct.
But
The AMI.
The lease period kind of comes into play there because somebody who's just down here working for the summer can't sign a year lease. But again, I don't think that's within what we're talking about.
My client is looking at year leases very clearly. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Have potential rents been proposed to planning and development, or are they making any suggestions or looking for any concessions for any of this for rents or, any percentages of rents? I mean, where you're not really seeking town funds, I don't think it really matters, but.
Conversations.
No, they did. No, but when we met with I can't,
conversation.
the 10%, the 10% affordable is going to be at, I believe it was 60% of the AMI. That was the only direction. I believe that's what they said. That was the only direction.
I just want to make sure I think it might be 80, Jessica, so I don't want to.
Yeah, it was either 60 or 80, and they were going to let us know. And
we're just going to follow the regular inclusionary zoning, what's required through the town. Is what we're going to follow.
I have no other questions.
Make a commitment that's.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm good.
I'm just still so curious about why this wasn't zoned as a lot versus.
You know what, Aaron? I don't want to. I think it may have. Like I said in the beginning, when you're doing an entire district of zoning, it's pretty easy to miss a half a lot. And I think I don't want to say that.
David, that can't be true. These people spend a lot of time doing that. I can't imagine.
They're very good at what they do.
Missed it. What?
We're on. I think it. In retrospect, I think they would have been happy if it had been included, and it's just. there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lots in this district. And some of them are tiny, and this one kind of looks like it's 2, but it's really 1. So things happen, and when you're drafting zoning,
they're writing overall. I mean, there was a lot of work.
It's very difficult, and
I don't doubt. I'm not.
and it's
I'm,
like looking at an eye chart. And I think sometimes those lots do sometimes occasionally plop into a district that maybe they otherwise would have preferred if it went into a different one. How's that for being diplomatic?
I'm not buying it, but that's okay. I just don't get it. I mean, it falls into a zone where this is not allowed, right? I mean, that's what you're here for, right? Because it's in a zone that this isn't allowed.
That's correct. But because of the unique nature of the lot, because this is a double lot.
I know, I get that. I understand that. I'd love to hear
that's the
from
whole
Jim
purpose
Cook.
of a variance. I actually do think it, had this been brought before them when the plan came out, that this would have been included in the DMS. I believe that with all sincerity. I've been practicing down here for 30 years, Aaron. There's nothing I will do to ever, mislead a board because my reputation is too important for that.
I get it, Dave. I get that.
No, I'm just telling you what I think.
I know. I appreciate that. I would never question that whatsoever. I would love to hear from planning to say, to ask them, why was the lot not included in this zone? You wouldn't even be here. It'd be a by right at this point, but it wasn't. So was it missed, or was it simply just not part of the zone that makes it a by right, which forces you here, I guess, which maybe that's the answer, and it's relatively simple, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here. I'm kind of.
I'm going to give you my opinion. I believe it was missed. I believe it was missed.
And that's why we've had so many meetings with the planning board. I don't mean to chime in. Obviously, everyone will make their decisions tonight, but we had so many meetings with them, and they themselves, and I'll say it because David won't, they were kind of kicking themselves that we are doing this, and it's all good and everyone will make their decisions, but and again, I'm the developer, so no one wants to listen to me, but it was very clear that they were bummed that we had to go through this process because it should have been included. That was my interpretation. David doesn't want to say it.
I do know. I mean, I think I did say it. I think it was a mistake, but we have a top-notch planning department. I deal with all the towns on the Cape and even some off-top Cape. We have a top-notch planning department. And, as Matt said, when you're putting together zoning and you're looking at this eye chart for a small little half of a portion of a lot to slip through the cracks, it's not, I don't think that it would, perfection's a very high standard to follow in anything in life. I certainly strive for it, but and very rarely hit it. So,
but right, David, the planning board wants us to be here because they are in favor of this.
Yeah. So
yeah, they were supportive. Yep.
Spot zoning is difficult, and this is sort of what this gets into is spot zoning.
Right.
It's very tedious.
Yeah.
It's probably they had to draw the line somewhere, and they can't spot zone 16 properties along, behind the line there. It's just they had to draw it somewhere, and then just leave it up to us to determine. If it's a good use.
I get.
Mark, I think it does meet the variance requirements, and that's the big thing here.
Yeah,
and that's why rather than trying to go and rezone it and fix it, it's it does meet the variance requirements. I mean, it's clearly an odd, bizarre lot with the way it's split into 2 zones and the way it's set up and everything like that, because it's not just under the law, it's not just the lot, but it's also the structures. And clearly, this is a unique lot, and I think we meet the other variance requirements. And that's why we're here tonight, is to seek a variance. And I know that a variance is a big deal. I don't take it lightly at all. But if this didn't, the shape, topography, and structures is the language in the statute and structures, and that also includes, the fact that it crosses 2 zoning lots, the fact that it has 2 actual main intersections of the town, South Street and High School and Main and High School, all on the same lot. It has all those features, which I think gives the board more than ample authority to make a ruling with respect to that criteria. And then again, with the hardship, because we thought going into it, the zoning changed, which is a financial hardship. And then in the third criteria, again, not, this is actually beneficial to the general well-being of the town. So we meet the legal requirements, regardless of whether this should have been zoned or shouldn't have been zoned. We get into that, and I'm happy to get into that with you. But if you take that completely aside and just look at this from a strictly legal standpoint, we meet the requirements. And that's what, I think you as a board, and I know that, variances, this board takes variances very seriously. You don't get wink and a nod variances from this board, and I understand that. But this isn't that. This is a very serious variance request with more than ample evidence to provide this board to make a ruling that would hold up. And I don't think there's any neighbors in opposition here tonight that would argue to the contrary or file an appeal.
Herb, have we done public comment or?
No, we've not.
No, we have not.
Anybody want to go there?
Do you have anything more to say, David? I'm
more than happy to answer further questions, but I think I've said enough.
Do we want to put something in the conditions about guaranteeing the 20 parking spaces and leave the means up to you? I don't want to say signs and designated parking spaces or anything like that, but I think the other board members are in favor of some kind of designation of the parking spaces.
Well, let me ask a question to Anna. Anna, when you have an apartment complex, are there requirements to that, like parking and I can't do Airbnb? What are we approving here?
Residential debate.
Is Anna here?
What? Yeah, I'm not sure what your question is, Paul.
When we approve an apartment building, with that, does it automatically have requirements with respect to prohibiting short-term rentals and requirements for parking places? What goes
the parking spaces are required, given the use.
All right. How about short-term rentals?
To my knowledge, if you register an apartment with the town, it's 12-month leases. We don't have regulations for short-term rentals.
Okay, so that's automatic with, once we approve the variance, then those come with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that ends half an hour conversation.
I'm fine with not designating parking spaces too.
I still think given this particular situation, since it's a little bit odd and they are going to be running the business in front, I think it's at least for now, it makes sense to have designated spaces or just the 20. Again, doesn't matter where they put them, but I think we should open up to public comment and see if there's anything there. If not, we can come back.
Because you can get people shopping on Main Street stealing the parking spaces. So
you can.
We watch it like a hawk. But yeah,
Excellent.
we're open. We're open if you guys want us to designate.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Attorney Lawler? Okay. Let's move on to public comment. Anna, do we have any?
We do not.
Okay. Would anybody like to move to close public comment?
Motion to close public comment.
I'll second that. Oh, I can't second that, can I?
I second.
Okay. We'll take a roll call vote. Paul Pinard.
In favor.
Mark Hanson.
In favor.
Denise Johnson.
Favor.
And I am in favor. And Aaron?
I'm in favor.
Okay. Thank you, people. So now we get to the question of who would like to make findings. Denise?
Okay.
Are you sure? I wouldn't want to, but that's okay.
Well, are we starting?
I never want to.
Owing to circumstances related to soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land structures, and especially affecting such land or structures, but not affecting generally the zoning district in which it is located. A literal enforcement of the provisions of the zoning ordinance would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner. Desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from intent of purpose of the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I think we got to add specifics to that because
You do. You need to each one individually.
Right.
What do you mean?
You need to propose your criteria or your rationale for 1, 2, and 3. Owing to circumstances, you need to state your rationale for that. Number 2, same thing. Number 3, same thing. And we vote on your proposal.
No objections to the soil condition, shape, or topography of such land structures, especially affecting. Number 2, believe there's a literal enforcement of the provisions of the zoning ordinance, which does not involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner. Desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying. Okay.
Well, let me add to number 3 then.
Okay.
With respect to the detriment of the good is that the intent of the town is to expand housing, and one good with respect to this item number 3 here is it expands housing for the town. Someone want to take a crack at 2 and 1?
I'd like to go at 1 and say that in this particular instance, the shape of this lot bounds 2 different zoning ordinances. And those zoning ordinances do affect, and the zoning districts in which they fall with the 2 of them does affect this property and does make it unique in this area.
Okay.
Number 2, if I could also take a stab at that, is this, our inability to change this from a motel to residence greatly decreases the petitioner's ability to provide income to the property in a meaningful way in order to stabilize the property while potential permitting and work goes on in potential phase 2.
Thank you.
And those are your findings.
Right.
Shall we vote on the findings? Would anybody like to second Denise's findings?
I'll second that.
Okay. Those in favor, Paul?
In favor.
Mark?
I'm in favor.
Aaron? You're muted, Aaron.
I am in favor.
Thank you. And Denise?
In favor.
Thank you.
And Herb, are you in favor?
I as well am in favor. I see you, Matt. Okay. Do you have any conditions, Denise?
Yes. Variance number, Denise Johnson, variance number 2023-024 is granted pursuant to section 240-24 1.5 B1, allowing non-conforming use to be changed to a different non-conforming use that is from a different use category than the existing non-conforming use, and 240 24.1.7.d. Multi-unit dwelling to allow multi-unit dwellings in the DN district greater than 4 dwelling units in any one building per lot for the conversion of 20 existing motel rooms into 20 studio apartments at 473 Main Street, Hyannis. The site development shall be constructed in substantial conformity with the plan entitled Change of Use Plan, sheet C1.0 by Baxter Nye Engineering and Surveying, dated August 14th, 2023. The above described development shall represent full building out of the lot. No further changes to the lot shall be permitted without approval from the board. The decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, and copy of the recorded decision shall be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals office and the building division prior to issuance of a building permit. The rights authorized by this variance must be exercised within 1 year. And then I guess we wanted to add here that the developer will provide 20 parking places allocated to this building to serve the 20 dwellings proposed.
Designated.
Oh, and these spaces shall be designated to individual renters. Okay.
Very good.
Good, Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion on number 1? Just in reading, Attorney Lawler, was there an actual floor plan presented to site plan review?
There was an engineering, the actual floor plan.
The only reason I'm asking is it says per lot conversion of 20 existing motel rooms into 20 studio apartments. I noticed that you presented studios and ones. So did you have?
I guess it would be studios and ones.
And 1-bedroom apartments.
And then I just for clarification, I just want to make sure, and maybe I missed it, but for the numbers that in section 1 that it's 240-24.15B1 small b v and 240-2417D1 capital C. Just for the record, I just want to make sure that those both are in there correctly.
Thank you. Would we agree on that wording that it would be the 20 studio or 1-bedroom apartments?
You can say a combination of, or was there something presented that we could reference?
20 studio slash.
There was the plan that was presented today to you. We can include that.
That's fine. I think it helps you. If you say 20 studios, you're going to have a hard time putting ones in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a mistake.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mark.
So
and lastly, on the provision on the extra provision about the parking, can we just put language in that can be altered through special permit through this board, so we can include all the parking in one look if and when we come back?
They're going to force you to look anyway. It's one lot, is it not?
I understand that but the legal difference between a variance, if it's in a variance as opposed to special permit.
Oh, special permit.
Yeah. That's why it's a different animal. All we just have to say is
let's just leave it. Let's just leave it out. What
can be included in any further?
You can just put language. This section may be altered by special permit, and that should be fine. That's all you need to say, and that gives you the flexibility. It gives you exactly what you want, the marked spaces, and then it gives you your same board the flexibility later on to look at the project as a whole.
Okay.
If that's fair.
Okay, so what's the final wording going to be? And this is for number 5.
20 parking places allocated to this building with designation to individual renters. This shall be reviewed at a future date as needed.
I don't think it should be designated per renter because that means you'd have to change the sign
per unit
every time somebody changes a rent. I say designated per unit.
Per occupant.
The language I would add to the end, if I may, this may be altered by special permit. This provision 5 may be altered by special permit. I think that gives the board the absolute authority, and it gives us the flexibility to ask for what we intend to, or maybe asking for.
Denise, I just put corresponding unit because if you put occupant, it runs into that. Who is the tenant? Just say the corresponding unit.
Located to this building per unit?
To the corresponding unit.
Okay.
Okay, Jenna or Anna, do you want to read back what we officially have for number 5?
Jenna, would you like to do that?
I can try. I have the developer will provide 20 parking spaces allocated to this building, and these spaces shall be designated to the corresponding unit. this may be altered by special permit.
That sounds good.
Yes. Boy, it must look like a real slave driver here, huh? Jeez. Okay.
And are you Anna, are you going to reference in number 1 the document that they provided as far as floor plan today?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
What was that? Was that C1.0? No, that's the site plan.
No, it's the here, hold on, I can bring it up. It's the architectural.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it would be A1.01 as prepared by DJSA Architects, and looking for a date.
Bottom left.
Zach, I don't know the date on this plan.
Bottom left, not 8/14,
dated
23.
14/2023.
Very good. Okay. All right, so we have our conditions. Would somebody like to second Denise's conditions?
Second, Aaron.
Okay, roll call vote. Paul Pinard,
Yeah, in favor.
Mark Hanson,
In favor.
Aaron Webb,
In favor.
Denise Johnson,
Favor.
and I am also in favor. Boy, that was like pulling teeth, but I think we got a good product out at the end.
Great product.
talked about
Thank you,
it.
folks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's 9
so
o'clock
much.
at night. You're all
Thank you.
volunteers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
And
Bye-bye.
we got 2 minutes left till 10, so we made it under the wire.
I mean,
Okay. I would, I don't see any correspondence. I don't see any matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. Upcoming meetings, October 11th, 2023, October 25th, 2023, November 8th, 2023. I move to adjourn.
Second, Aaron.
Okay. And
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
wait, that's not legal. We can't adjourn until we have a roll call vote. Okay. Denise?
In favor.
Manny?
In favor.
Larry?
In favor.
I heard some there. Yeah.
In
I would
favor.
be-
I was muted. In favor.
Okay. Aaron?
I'm in favor.
Mark?
In favor.
Paul?
In favor.
Paul already. And myself, I'm in favor too. Good night, everybody.